Chair, you have a live mic.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson. We're going to start off the meeting with, hopefully in the right way. I'm going to ask Commissioner Hall to lead us in prayer, and then I'm going to ask Commissioner LaCastro to lead us in the pledge.
Father, we just thank you. We come to you today asking you for your presence and your wisdom. We love you, we trust you, and we welcome your presence in the meeting. And we pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Please join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a reminder to folks that may want to speak on any particular topic. If you've not already done so, please register to speak, and we'll call you on the specific item that you want to comment on. Ms. Patterson.
Well, welcome to our March 4th workshop. We have several topics on the agenda today, so we're going to jump right in and start out with item 2A, which is Clam Pass. We have several members from the Pelican Bay Services Department here, or division here, to present and to answer questions. So with that, let me turn it over to Mr. Dorrell.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for what you do. Additionally, with me today is our Deputy Director, Chad Coleman. I also have Jeremy Stirk, who is our leading environmentalist, and Dr. Mohammed Dabiz, who is our coastal engineer, who can speak separately to both civil engineering issues as well as water quality issues and the management plan that is in place there. I think what I'd like to do is perhaps give you a quick overview and history of the more modern times associated with the system that is there. And I'll need a little help flipping through these slides. What I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about dredging. The permits, there are two that are behind the dredging. The fact that the Clam Bay system was the county's first natural resource protection area and designated as such, and then what that entails, and then specifically the management plan that is in place there. With that, I would want you to know that from the beginning, I think the Clam Bay residents and taxpayers have really been wonderful stewards of your first natural resource protection area. They have devoted themselves to the science and the research behind what is one of the smallest natural inlets on the west coast of Florida. And they have spent an awful high amount of their own tax dollars in addition to support from the BCC where applicable for both their beaches and the mangroves and the inlet itself. I want to go back about 25 years this morning. The first real, I'll call it modern day issues associated with the system began in the late 90s. Fortunately, a year after I left county government. And so it manifests itself in a fairly large mangrove die-off that occurred in the north end of the system. There was widespread concern throughout the entire area as to what was causing the mangrove die-off that began in 1998. And so that began the first attempt to create a management plan and a set of circumstances and conditions in support of the system. It also resulted in a fairly novel and innovative series of miles of hand-dug channels in the north end of the system to be able to convey stormwater out of the system and into the saltwater system as a way of saving the mangroves. But that all started in the late 1990s with the first management plan and then the first joint permit between the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the Army Corps of Engineers. The first hydraulic dredge occurred the following year. In 1999, the system has been hydraulically dredged with a mini dredge on at least 3 occasions and has been mechanically dredged with either drag lines or track hose or excavators on about 7 other occasions. Over the last 25 years, every 2 to 3 years, the system needs some sort of help in that regard. Let's go to the next slide. The permit was set to expire in 2008, and over the course of the last 25 years, approximately 21 of those years, the Pelican Bay Services Division was responsible for the operation, maintenance, and oversight of Clam Bay and the estuary that is there. There was a brief period of time when our colleagues at Coastal Zone Management were responsible for the system. And as a result of some changes in the design parameters and a fair amount of opposition within the environmental community countywide and Pelican Bay in particular, there were a series of challenges associated with the inlet there that delayed the issuance of a permit, even with an extension. The long and the short of it was that in 2012, the inlet closed completely and created a fair amount of alarm on the part of people throughout the entire urban area. As a result of that, and with the a revision to our ordinance the following year in 2013, the stewardship of that system was given back to the Pelican Bay Services Division. And at the same time, the pass was reopened mechanically. This is actually a picture from about 12 years ago when that occurred. Next slide. In conjunction with that, and with the effort to obtain new 10-year permits from both the Army Corps and the DEP, there was a condition put upon us, which became, I think, a bellwether event, that there needed to be a new and more comprehensive approach to the management plan that was in place. So the following year, after the pass was reopened, again, this is a picture of a post-event there, work was underway. There were an astounding number of 28 public meetings and workshops that took place during that particular period of time. Next slide. So these are the various elements of what became Collier County's first natural resource protection area and the overlay for that. You can see the legal description in the boundary on the exhibit that is there to the left. It shows very well inner, outer, and upper Clam Bay, which are very integral to the system there. The original goal was to establish a basin in conjunction with the permits, and the permits are tied to the management plan and cannot be amended or changed unless the management plan is supportive of that change. The objectives, though, were to maintain and protect the very unique natural flora and fauna within the various communities that were there, to ensure, number 2, that the estuary had an adequate tidal prism or flushing and combination of fresh water flows out of the inlet. Perhaps most importantly, to monitor and control water quality. Believe it or not, there are some ancient Calusa archaeological shell middens that are there that are incorporated within the plan, and unique protection status given to the archaeological sites, and then to promote passive recreation. And those were the original goals of the Board of County Commissioners at the time that the plan was taken underway. Next slide. Plan was finally adopted by the Board of County Commissioners in 2015, and as a result of that, new permits were issued early the following year by both the Corps and the DEP for maintenance, dredging activities, and a whole host of conditions associated with what is now an annual report that needs to be compiled and submitted and approved by the board at Pelican Bay Services. Again, there have been a total of about 12 events, either excavation, grading, mechanical dredging, or the hydraulic dredging with little mini dredges that have taken place over time. Our costs have been the lowest per cubic yard of any comparable work, because I'd like to think that we thought a little bit outside the box And frankly, we were able to do certain things mechanically as opposed to paying fairly high mobilization costs on the part of people who own and operate mini dredges in environments like this. Former County Manager Oakes commissioned a 5-year review of the management plan and the operating parameters that occurred in 2019, and it was accepted at that time. Here is a copy, and did we bring extra copies? Let's pass those out. This is the current design dredge fill and grading template for the inlet. It might be helpful. It's hard to read this one, so we brought copies when we get into questions and answers and concerns on the part of our city residents who are to the south of us. The average dredge cut is anywhere between 4.5 to 5.5 NVD, which is essentially mean sea level. It is a fairly shallow design dredge cut, and that is for particular reasons that enhance the outgoing tide's flushing ability to flush or to scour out sand that finds its way into the inlet. There are 3 different sections. Section A is actually the mouth of the inlet. It has the deepest parameters. Section B historically has the largest accumulation of sand that will impact the system. Section C to the east, where it makes a 90-degree turn and heads south into the bay there, has the least amount of sand. The most recent bathymetric surveys, which were submitted in February this past month, show that there's currently about 10,000 cubic yards of material in the system. The highest in history was when the pass closed back in 2012. It had 20,000 cubic yards. On average, it will have anywhere between 13,000 to 13,500 cubic yards before it needs help. And the way that we know that is through underwater bathymetric surveys, and also we measure tide levels in real time, and we correlate the difference in the tide between low tide and high tide. And we need to have at least a 1/2 foot of difference between low tide and high tide in terms of elevation in order to get enough water into the system on an incoming tide to be able to help with that scour and prolong the ability for this thing to maintain itself. And currently it has been in excess of 0.6%. So while it's got 10,000 cubic yards of sand in it, as reported last month, the tide range ratios are still about 1/10 to about 15 tenths of a foot over where they need to be, which is a good thing. As a result of that, as I stand here today, I don't believe that we will try to rush to do a dredge event there in advance of sea turtle nesting season. I think the preference and the recommendations of our engineers and consultants would be we'd be better off to wait till the fall at the end of sea turtle nesting season and hopefully what will not be a busy tropical storm season. The entire system is very, very effective by wave energy and prevailing winds. Prevailing winds over time is measured and within our management report predominantly come from the west onshore. And if you have a bad hurricane season where the winds are from the southwest or the west-southwest, it pushes a lot of that beach renourishment sand up into the system. And that has been an area of concern. We've had a number of beach renourishment projects in the last 3 years. There's one currently underway this year in Park Shore. Some of that sand will be up in Clam Pass at the park and the inlet probably this time next year. There's another beach renourishment project that is contemplated, I believe, for Vanderbilt and Pelican Bay. During the winter cold front season, some of that sand can push south as well. So we're dealing with a lot of dynamics, but we're primarily dealing with historical prevailing winds, the intensity of the winds, and the height of the waves. And so wave energy is something that we monitor very closely. Next slide. A little bit of the most recent history and work associated there. Really, in the last 8 years, there have been about 6 events. Some of that is because of the hurricane activity of the most recent period of time. And again, over the course of that time, there was only one hydraulic dredge, and the last one occurred 7 years ago in 2018. So again, it's fairly rare for us to do and commission a hydraulic dredging event. We've been very effective over time and very cost effective by being able to do both grading and excavation and mechanical dredging where necessary. Next slide, I've already talked a little bit about this. The current permit expires a year from today, and so permit renewal is underway. Fortunately, the new cycles are that they will be 15-year permits, not 10-year permits. And so that work is underway as we speak at the moment. You will probably hear from residents of Naples Cay and Seagate today. They sort of commissioned an independent civil engineering review of the management plan and the current dredge and fill and grading parameters of our management plan, and are going to have some recommendations of their own. I think we're willing to explore or evaluate or model alternatives, but it would need to take place as part of a permit modification or a permit amendment. The time that it takes and the review and the comment and the notice periods, I would not want to be trying to evaluate alternative designs over the course of the next 12 months to potentially change the fill and cut characteristics of a dredge event. It is better to do that through an amendment process, and we have done that in the current cycle. As a result of a lot of the beach renourishment sand, the fill template, or where I can put the sand when we remove it from the inlet, we ran out of capacity. The current management plan obligates us to fill to capacity the public park first at Clam Pass before any of the sand can go on the north side of the inlet and onto the beaches at Pelican Bay. We ran out of places to place sand, both in terms of elevation and length and width. And so we amended the most recent permits about 1.5 years ago to be able to enlarge and lengthen further north and further south on the fill side. And it's a much easier process. So if we're going to contemplate any changes to the design, it needs to be as part of a little more deliberative process, I think. With that, I want to stop because I had sort of thought we'd, my comments from an overview perspective could be accomplished in about 15 minutes. What I would like to do is see what initial questions or observations are there on the part of the commission, and then see whether or not our two consultants this morning feel like they should elaborate, and then presumably turn to the public. So happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. That was very well done, very informative. Are there any questions or comments from the commission before we turn to the public? Commissioner Hall. I'm sorry.
Let him go first.
Okay, Commissioner Hall.
Was quicker on the button than
Yep.
he was.
Thank you, Mr. Doral. So I have several little questions, and I may have missed it, but just what happened when Mother Nature was in charge? I know that this thing closed 1 year and that there was a die-off, but way before that, what happened with this pass?
Going back into the late 60s and early 70s, dredge and fill development, both north and south, took place in the Naples Cay, Seagate, Park Shore Unit 5, which is the most northern, and all of the Vanderbilt Beach Estates and the Vanderbilt Lagoon. So it went from an identical type of mangrove estuary to a 1960s, 1970s dredge fill canal in the backyard sort of approach. As a result of that, the hydraulics of Clam Pass were altered. While there is a a series of culverts that are underneath the main drive into Naples Cay and Seagate. There's not a lot of tidal flushing or transfer that takes place there. And the northern end of what was a long linear mangrove estuary was blocked when Vanderbilt Beach Road was constructed, and then the ensuing Connors Estate and Vanderbilt Beach communities were developed in the early 1970s. So we've got a system that is hampered or hamstrung and needs help in order to prevent what actually occurred in my hometown in Sarasota at Midnight Pass about 40, 50 years ago. The pass closed, the county commission elected to let Mother Nature take its course under those circumstances. Never reopened. It reopened briefly following Hurricane Helene, I think, and closed up like a day later. So systems that are hampered need some help from a hydrology perspective, because otherwise they will fail over time. It's a great question.
Yeah, I wasn't advocating for that. I was just, so basically the development spread the water, spread the flow out, and that's the reason why we need help today. I get that. So secondly, how long does it take? How long does the dredge take? You know, you said we can't do it before sea turtle season, or we don't recommend that, but I was just curious as to how long it takes to dredge it.
I'm going to get Chad to help answer that from a procurement side, because it takes much longer to do the pre-construction than it takes to actually physically do the work.
The physical work is only about a month's worth of work, but going through the procurement process and getting the right contracts. Right now, we're using a beach maintenance contract, which is expired, and we're looking for an extension there. We've talked with Coastal Zone about including hydraulic piece to that, because right now it's just mechanical. But actual construction, you're looking at a month to 2 months for actual physical work, mobilization, execution, and demobilization.
For our record, could you go ahead and state your name?
For that, Chad Coleman, operations, my title changed. Assistant.
I worked hard to create that position.
Assistant Director or Deputy Director, Neil's bodyguard, whatever you want to call it, for Pelican Bay Services Division, Chad Coleman.
Great. So basically, we're in the way. Government's in the way of getting things done.
No, not necessarily. Like I said, we're using that contract. We work with CZM when they renew that contract, if we can add that piece. As long as we have that contract in place, we can mobilize and we can do that work. And actually, 2020, we did an in-house project where I just rented equipment and we did it in-house. It was COVID time frame. We couldn't get anybody to do the work, so we made it happen at that time. But I wouldn't say that the government is in the way. We have the contracts in place. It's just their availability as well. So if you're on a tight time frame before sea turtle season, that's asking a lot, especially when these companies are doing beach renaissance.
I was curious as to how long it took, because
Yeah.
I wasn't wanting it before or after it.
Yep, and the only thing that changes it if you have an event during the work. We've had that happen too. A storm event or anything, because it is very sensitive. And if you have prevailing winds or a lot of storms, and if you have a hydraulic dredge in there, it gets a little rocky, and they have to pull that thing out and restage it.
Gotcha. And then lastly, when we do dredge, is there a definite positive result for the Seagate community, or does that result degrade over time?
The entire system will degrade over time, again, depending on wave heights and prevailing winds. As soon as we reopen the pass, the difference between low tide and high tide can be 0.8 to a foot. That's a lot of salt water that will, fan out through the estuary there. And dilution is a wonderful thing when it comes to water quality, because the more salt water you get in, the more it improves the overall measurable things, whether it's nitrogen, phosphorus, dissolved oxygen, E. coli, copper. Those are the big four things that we monitor also on an annual basis and produce water quality reports.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Colwell.
Thank you, Chairman.
Do we have that?
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. I'm glad you got this picture up because I had a few questions about it. I know with our chart permitting the A, B, and C sections, and in reality, in this picture, it only goes up to where, I think the third bend, basically, in that photograph. Have you ever, or at any point, you remember, because there's a man-made structure which is down by the park, which is the bridge that bridges over the main body of the outer Clam Bay portion, which is a large body of water that's part of this system. Even in this picture, you can see, this is just a couple weeks ago, you can see that it looks like a buildup of sand in front of that man-made structure. Do you ever get in there and clear that out to help the rise and fall of the natural tide in the large body of the outer Clam Bay Pass?
We do not in the vicinity of the bridge, and the primary reason for that is you can actually see some areas of dry sand in that picture. And I will tell you that as it makes the 90-degree turn to the south, that's really the last viable tidal flat that has seagrass in it. Seagrass is another parameter that's very important to the overall health of the system. So we don't tend to dredge in there because it is adjacent to what is sort of the last viable seagrass flat that is there. We met with the residents of the city several months ago, and they made them aware that we were going to do a bathymetric survey and that we were going to extend the survey south of Section C all the way to essentially where the sea kayak launching area is. And we just got the results of that, and they show that honestly there has been little change in shoaling or the areas of elevation south of there. I can have Dr. DeBee speak to that. I don't even know if we've shared the results with Seagate and Naples K yet, but we had the entire system bathymetrically surveyed.
South of the bridge?
Yes, sir. All the way down to where the resident sea kayak launching area is there adjacent to your parking lot.
So that elevation south of the bridge has not changed?
No.
But
We have,
let's say the level of water passing before the bridge, has that changed? Depth of water, I
just north
guess.
of, yeah, we have both the last entire survey and the one that was just done in December.
Mr. Doral, if you could use the microphone, that'll...
Yeah, sorry. We have both the last entire survey of the system and also have just received the analysis of the new entire bathymetric survey that was done in December.
For the record, Mohammed Abis, project engineer, I'm vice president of Humiston and Moore Engineers. The section between where we end the dredging in Section C or around the bend was only dredged once when the first management plan was implemented. So the dredging extended from Clam Pass all the way, which was cut 4, to Outer Clam Bay. And then we had 3 cuts between Inner and Upper Bay in 1999. Those sections were made primarily to make sure that we have adequate flushing throughout the mangrove forest. And from the monitoring the years after, the area of dynamics and main changes were limited, as Neil indicated, to the mouth of the inlet and Section B and to some extent Section C. And also when we modified the permit in 2014, we had to kind of reduce Section C by 50 feet to accommodate buffers to viable seagrass habitat, which is a protected resource. So as far as the current survey that we completed indicate that we don't have significant or measurable change over the past 7 years from the last time we surveyed Outer Clam Bay. The survey basically showing, for the most part, everything is stable, and I have the results in if the discussion would necessitate that we look over them. But there are areas where the shoals shift. And as far as flow, while that shift might be critical to just how the shape or size of a shoal is, but it is not as far as flow, because the flow kind of meanders around the shoals. So what we look at in our assessment is, through any critical section, what's the cross-sectional area of flow? And if we find restrictions, that's when we recommend intervention. And lastly, as Neil indicated, this system has, I would say, an unparalleled system of monitoring that does not really exist in any inlet that I've worked on, and I've worked on almost all the inlets of Southwest and Central Florida, because we have real-time monitoring. We look at the tide ratios almost on a daily basis at our end, and we report it to Pelican Bay Service District once a month. And when we see deficiencies or critical nature of the flow, we take action in additional physical monitoring and then recommendations for dredging. So we have an early sensing system, and we also have physical monitoring that is done at a 6 months to 1 year to allow us to make sure that the system remain functional.
But you agree with Neil that the best way for a healthy bay is the natural flow and inflow of natural salt water from the Gulf into it during a normal tide cycle. Do you agree with him on that?
Yes, that's the main premise of the management plan, is that we need to maintain the flow that is necessary to number one, provide the vital needs for the environmental system, because it is an NERPA, or a natural protected system, and its main directive or objective is the ecology of the system. We have a comprehensive monitoring system that monitor all the environmental resources.
So, out of everything you've been saying, basically you're saying that the people that live adjacent to Outer Clam Bay, the people live right on it, within feet of it, like the city residents to the south, they shouldn't have noticed any change in the bay, according to what you're monitoring and saying, that you haven't noticed anything that's changed over the last several decades or few decades.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, when we dredge,
Okay, so there is a problem then.
there are problems throughout the system when you have the intensity of storms that we get.
Okay.
And
That's on us, human beings, to work that out and fix it, correct?
to the extent that we can, because every system has an equilibrium.
Have you guys ever applied for a navigational dredging permit?
Commissioner Caldwell, if you wouldn't, just as to help me out a little bit, he's in the middle of answering that question. I'd like to.
He was talking a lot, and I'm just trying to get to where the easy,
Okay.
simple parts of it. Either the bay's healthy or not, and we have a way to fix it.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear the answer to us. You've asked great questions. I just like to maybe to hear his full answers.
So every system equilibrates to the balance of the forces that are making it. So if you dig a deep hole that doesn't have current to keep it open, it will shoal right away. And the more you dig, the faster it will fill in. So, but by that token, if we dredge Clam Pass bigger and wider and deeper, it will be to the detriment of the system. We have to dredge it to what balances with the volume of water that can go in and out of the system. And even right after we dredge it, it can never stay the way we just dredged it. Because by nature, when you have a backwater and an open water with an inlet connecting it, you have to have the formation of flood shoals, which is on the landward side of the inlet, and ebb shoals on the seaward of the system. When you first dredge it, as Neil indicated, you will have almost synonymous tide range inside as much as in the Gulf, but as not sustainable, because it's going to start to reach that equilibrium. And we monitor that equilibrium, and once we are at the critical threshold, we continue to monitor it, and when it crosses it, that's when we recommend dredging.
But once again, you're an engineer, so you understand the concept of volume,
Yes.
right? So the largest volume of this whole system is the outer bay,
Yes.
right? So we have the most narrow area just to the north of the large part of the bay, which is the man-made structure, which is the bridge. And all I'm saying is the dredging always ends at that third bend. We never really go down and see how much restriction, how much actual flow to give the volume, the largest volume, the ability to rise and fall naturally. And I mean, is there a way to fix that? I guess that's all I'm asking.
So I can tell you that we have two gauges, one by section C and one inside outer clam bay. And we measured the flow. And when we measured the flow on these two, they are almost the exact same. It diminishes between the Gulf and the one in section C because most of the shoaling is in that section. But between marker 14 and marker 4, these two are almost synonymous, and we monitor that on daily and monthly and yearly basis. If we see deficiency between 4 in outer clam bay and 14, that means there is a clog in between, and there is none. Even the consultant that Seagate commissioned acknowledged that fact, that we do not have flow deficiency in that section as far as flow. Because what I'm saying is you could see a shoal, but the water finds its way around that shoal. And I look at the entire cross-sectional area, and if it reduced, then that is critical. But if it's just shifted from here to there, and it's still the same cross-sectional area, the same amount of flow is getting through.
Let's see if there are other questions.
Are you telling me I'm done?
No, I said to see if you had other questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, yeah, I had one, but Commissioner Saunders had
Well, no,
not to ask it yet.
no, I
Can
just,
ask it again.
yeah, go ahead. No,
Have
all
you
I was
ever-
all I was suggesting is that you were asking great questions, but he wasn't able to complete his answer. And I was just asking to let him do that because it was interesting.
I had asked one, but he never got back to it, but
Yep.
I'm gonna ask it again. Have you ever applied for a navigational dredging permit?
To my understanding, during the 25 years that I've been working on Clam Pass, navigation is not one of the objectives of Clam Pass.
Is it, because I know you guys have, well, it's a natural body of water.
There are many natural bodies of water throughout the state that are maintained for hydraulic efficiency and health of the system and are not navigational connections. And if people navigate through them, it's at their own risk. But there is also the declaration or the fact that this is declared an ERPA, which means the priority is to the health of the system. When you have a navigation inlet, especially commercial navigation inlets, those becomes more of a public interest at a level that allows for environmental impacts. In this case, it's the other way around. It's an environmental protected system that the priority should be to the health of the mangrove and the ecosystem. And from the environmental studies that were done in 1999 and then in 2014 and then current monitoring, we as engineering and as physical change, we follow the lead of the environmental needs, and then we work with the community on the recreational benefits that can be accommodated within the ecosystem. Similar to if it's a national park or any protected body of water, you just have to allow recreational benefits that does not cause detrimental impacts to the system. And as Neil indicated, that path, that section between end of section C to the bridge, the shoulders of that natural channel is where all the documented seagrasses in the system have been. And the shoal that you see from the bridge is actually the place where we have the most observable seagrasses to date. So it is just, even if we want to, and we go to the agencies, they will say, thou shall not impact one blade of seagrasses. And that is a very high burden to clear with the environmental agencies.
So I mean, long story short, because the way it's categorized and the way it has been for several decades of the ecological side of it, that you wouldn't be able to get a navigational permit through that section anyways, right? Is that the answer?
Over the course of 25 years, there was one attempt to conduct what I would, to your point, would have been a navigational project with navigational markers similar to intercoastal type markers for boating.
I'm leaning more towards us figuring out a way
It was
to
not
get
approved.
permitting more to help the water flow in and out. I wasn't not so much saying it to navigate, but in reality, navigational permits sometimes are easier than getting the other permits. I was just asking if that's a possibility. From your answer, it sounds like it's not because of that seagrass section south of C. Does that sound
And the
right?
need, since the flow doesn't show that there is a deficiency in flow between the back section of the Clam Pass and Outer Clam Bay. I would say most of the deficiency in the flow is in the upper bays. Most of our mangrove die-offs are in the upper bays, other than storm impacts, because Outer Clam Bay has very robust tidal flow that is made possible by us maintaining Clam Pass.
My last question, I'll get on. Do you think since, let's say Ian, because this is probably the most active surge storm seasons we've had the past several years, because we've been putting a lot more man-made sand in these areas, do you think that's hampering some of this or exasperating or speeding up the process of this sand flowing back in? Because typically we're not putting that much loose silica sand around the mouth of this thing, over the years, because now all of a sudden we've had several events that we've had to add a lot more sand that's probably not fixed well to the ground to begin with. So it does flow a lot easier, almost like silt in and out of the bay. Do you think that may have been adding to why we're seeing maybe a little bit more recently than in the past?
Hurricane Ian and the storms that followed Hurricane Ian have impacted the entire coastline from Marco Island to Clearwater in Pinellas County. And none is more than what you see in that picture. If you see the extent of the sand intrusion into the vegetation, so our most impact is actually we lost a fringe of mangroves that could be 50 to 100 foot wide throughout the system from the sand intrusion from the coastal side. In the interior side, and as Neil indicated, we just completed a survey of Outer Clam Bay, and that survey shows no significant change with the exception of very small migration of shoals between this current 2025 survey and 2017 survey.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that hopefully we're not going to get hit with some more storms here over the next decade like that, and that it should start self-correcting itself because we're getting ahead of it with the last dredging project I think you just completed. Hopefully see some change in the Outer Bay Pass or Outer
Yep.
Bay. So, all right, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Commissioner LoCastro.
Neil, I just had one question. When you were going through your presentation, did I hear you right where you said when we're moving around the sand and doing dredging, your quote, and it was mixed in with the, your presentation, was sometimes we run out of places to put the excessive sand that we have. Is that a case?
That's why we amended the permit to extend the fill templates for that sand.
Okay. I mean, this is just me thinking out loud. I mean, I work very closely with Andy and Coastal Zone Management, and in my district, we're buying sand. We have places that were totally eroded, Cape Marco and lots of other places that even the doctor is aware of. Andy's educated me and groups of people saying, hey, sometimes, moving sand from point A to point B, the terminology I always say is the juice isn't worth the squeeze, by the time or the sand isn't of the quality, it has different things in it. But I just wanted to confirm, do we have good sand that we're dumping in places or we're getting rid of that we could be recycling and using in other places that would make sense? And maybe it's for the doc, maybe it's for you, Andy's sitting in the back. I just know that we're buying a lot of sand and trucking a lot of it into my district. When I just caught that little phrase of, wow, sometimes we're running out of places to put it. It's like, well, we might want to put it somewhere else if it's feasible. Sometimes it doesn't make sense.
It's a good It's a good problem to have. On the level of magnitude, it's probably less than 1,000 cubic yards.
Oh, okay.
Which in Andy's world is nothing.
Nothing, yeah, okay. That's, I just wanted to get that clear. Thank you, sir.
Just add to that clarification.
You need to get on the microphone.
What we did is that we ran out of space in the permitted template.
Gotcha.
So we expanded the template to kind of supplement areas where truck haul is the main source. So it's actually the area where we expanded it, adding dune and berm in areas that typically would get sand through truck haul.
Got it, makes sense, thank you.
Okay. I'm again going to urge the speakers to get closer to the microphone so everyone can hear. Commissioner McDaniel.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I want to blame those two nice people right there for my tardiness this morning. They were in the way for me to get in the parking lot, and that's the reason I was late. It didn't have anything to do with us not building any.
And I want to thank both of them for trying to block his entry.
You followed our direction perfectly.
Wish you more success next time. Commissioner McDaniel.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Doyle, would you go to a previous map that you showed where upper, lower, middle Clam Bay was on your, oh, you got to get your lady to help you with the buttons? Okay, that one right there.
Upper, inner, and outer.
Sir?
Upper, inner, and outer. North
Okay.
and south.
Upper, inner, and outer. Are we still, because I notice all of our maps, then the pictures that I'm seeing have the upper portion cut off. Are we still experiencing loss of mangroves in that upper?
I think that we have experienced a lot of regrowth. And Jeremy, if you don't mind, because he's just submitted the annual report, Jeremy Stirk is the one who not only does the monitoring, but their crews are the ones that are maintaining those hand-dug channels there. He can speak maybe a little more in terms of acreage and things of that nature.
Okay.
Sure. For the record, Jeremy Stirk, Tech Environmental. Yeah, we've been monitoring the mangrove since about 2015, my company. And, you know, obviously with the storms that we've seen since Ian and Irma to begin with, and Ian, there's been a lot of impacts to the mangrove system, external impacts. The majority of the stressed mangroves that we've had have been in the north of the system. Generally, they're recovering. You know, we usually see immediately after a storm like Irma or Ian, there's the first monitoring event. About 6 months later, we typically see a decline in the scoring that we give the mangroves. And then usually at about the year point, we see a rebound. And that's even what we've seen after the storms last year. We're seeing the mangroves recover. Now, that's not to say that they don't have a long way to go, but they're very resilient.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not done by any stretch, Mr. Chair.
Oh, no.
I'm not done by any stretch.
Quickly,
That was my lead-in question to get to where I'm going next.
there was an area in Bay Colony adjacent to what is known the dune swale, which is a natural drainage feature. Hurricane Ian overwashed the dune, and as Mohammed said, that sand has pushed inland by about 150 feet. Some of the mangroves that are in the dune swale area are now under 6 to 8 feet of sand and are expected to die.
You can see just from this picture to the last picture that you had up, that 100 to 150 foot swath has destroyed those mangroves inside, almost like a little barrier of mangroves, and then there's a swath in there where the sand got pushed up. And the reality of this is this entire system is behind at all. The entire system has silted in. I mean, you actually alleged that some of the channels in the upper Clam Bay have to be hand dug. My goodness. And we also know that this is a very complex subject. I mean, there are archaeological sites, as you've already mentioned early on. I don't know. I haven't seen a picture as to necessarily where they are, but that's really not part of this discussion. Relatively speaking, we have short-term circumstances, and that's the renewal of the existing permit, the modification of where we can then in fact disperse. And then we have a long-term issue with how we're doing and what we have been doing for 25 years plus. I have lived here, Mr. Doyle, almost as long as you. And I recall when the folks that lived in Seagate had deep water access. There was navigability out of Seagate. I think, I'm not an expert, but I think that seagrass, thou shalt not destroy seagrass, has to have certain elevations of sand underneath it so it has proper sunlight for it to in fact grow. And so when continuous dredging isn't effectuated, seagrass develops, and so therefore then thou shalt not destroy the seagrass. And so then an additional bureaucratic restriction comes online that then in turn impacts the entire health of the system with regard to the necessary flush so that we have good mangrove growth all the way through the system. If we don't have proper flush with the normal tidal flows, storms are going to come and go. We all know that. Collier County became very apathetic to storms and surge associated with the storms because the last surge event we had was 1960, before you were born. Pretty close. And so we really didn't have any kind of a surge event that actually transpired. And then what we ultimately learned, even in advance of Ian, which was the largest storm surge event that our community had, we had a converse impact with Irma, with 30 plus inches of rainfall that happened on the inland side. And conversely, we couldn't get the fresh water off our people from the outside. And so back to Commissioner Kowal's discussion with regard to the dredging that's in fact necessary, I would like for us to holistically view the whole system for ultimately to get to and again, it's going to come and go. The minute you dredge, I'm a dredger, but the minute you dredge, it begins to silt back in. Over time, that natural flush that comes every 12 hours with our tidal flows will allow for the health of the entire system to be ultimately maintained, have the necessary saltwater flush that the mangroves in fact need in order to survive and be healthy, and have the whole system work for the betterment of the environment at the same time. I guess my question, it comes back around to, have we done any exploration with regard to the history and the silting in of the outer Clam Bay? Because if I'm not mistaken, there are culverts that go underneath Seagate Drive that allow for additional flush, theoretically, in and out of the northern end of Venetian Bay. Am I correct with that?
Correct.
If I remember that. So I think this is just me looking at the entire system for quite some time. I think that we have to certainly take care of the short-term circumstances with the expiration, of the upcoming permit and its modification, so we have a place to put the sand. But I think a longer, more holistic plan needs to be developed for the entire system. What we have been doing personally, and I've been watching it for 8 years as a commissioner, and I've been watching it for 44 years that I've lived in Collier County, that entire system hasn't been managed properly. There has been a struggle between recreational uses and people that kayak don't want the motorboats, and the people that will have motorboats don't want the kayaks. And then, and by the way, the complement is the positive impact that the foundation has had with human runoff. I mean, you folks have done an amazing job to clean the fresh water that inevitably ends up in this estuary. But I think we really need to move towards holistic approach on the long-term process with regard to the entire system.
The first thing that you said, and the $10 word for that is eutrophication, and over time, wetland systems will become eutrophic, meaning that, sediment comes in, and as a result of that, the types of vegetation that it can sustain evolve over time as systems become eutrophic. And so I hear you, and I think that's some of what we are experiencing and attempting to manage in the upper reaches of the system by maintaining those hand-dug channels in order to get the fresh water out of there and away from the important, roots of the mangroves. But the other element, and there needs to be perhaps some discussion at some point, the Naples Cay and Seagate communities are not in our taxing district, and they are not in the natural resource protection area. My understanding is that those canals have a large amount of sediment in them. Water quality is an issue there. I don't believe that there's been any maintenance of those canals or anything taken into context with work that we're doing to the north of there. And so, if we're going to look at the entire system, and I think they're going to share more about their feelings and plans and desires in just a few minutes.
I'm sure that they will, but there again, that needs to be encompassed in the entire system study. The water quality that's coming out of the southern end that's outside of the NERPA, as well as what you folks have going on within the NERPA area.
And I will also submit to you that the water quality in the north end of Park Shore in Doctors Bay is overall worse because of the urban environment that it is within than the natural system that is the protection area.
I would concur with that statement as well, sir.
And if we can add to this.
Excuse me. Hang on just a second. If you're going to speak, that's fine, but I'm going to insist that you use the microphone.
Yeah, and in adding to this, the system in Moorings Bay and Doctor's Pass have almost synonymous tide fluctuation because it's maintained and jettied. So the flushing is not the only answer to water quality.
Don't disagree with that either.
Commissioner McDaniel, are you finished now? Or?
Relatively speaking, yes.
Okay. I just have one or two quick questions, then we'll get back to Commissioner Hall. In terms of the outer bay, from all the diagrams and everything you've said, it sounds like the health of the mangroves has been pretty consistently good, but I want to hear on the record, what is the condition of the mangroves in the outer clam bay as well as inner clam bay? What are there areas where it's becoming degraded? What's the condition of those?
There are some new areas that are in your park that are showing stress from high resolution aerial photography. And we intend to have that monitored as part of this fiscal year's cycle. We committed to that when we met with the Seagate. It's sort of midway in the park. On the east side, obviously, in the mangrove, there are some new mangrove areas that are stressed at the regional park.
And at this point, you don't know what's causing that stress, but you're going to evaluate that.
Yes, I presume that it is the same, and they don't have the hand-dug channels that were engineered to help drain that area the way that they were in the north. There's some, but there's not a lot.
How big an area is that?
Acreage-wise?
At most a couple acres.
Maybe 2 acres, but it's new.
Okay. Commissioner Hall.
So I've just got a question. I am more familiar with handling and managing water in a terrace and a cotton field than I am this. So I'm just going to throw something out. I just want to know if there's a possibility or if there's a no possibility or if it's taboo. But on this map, the one that you handed us, there's a little inlet in the clam bay that gets towards, there's a little skinny spot of mangroves. So my thought was, what would happen if you opened that and allowed like another inlet?
It would, short answer, there would be less water to go out the main inlet that would accelerate the shoaling and the types of performance concerns that we're concerned about. It's a good question, though.
Okay. Troy, do we have some registered speakers?
We have 7 registered.
I'm sorry, Commissioner McDaniel, you had something else before we
I
get to
just have
speakers?
one statement, and the statement is similar to what Commissioner Colwell said. Width, breadth, and depth creates volume. Remember that as you're going forward. creation of volume within the entire system will help the entire system, both north, south, east, and west.
Okay. For our speakers, we're limiting our speakers to 3 minutes. We'll be a little bit flexible if you got some technical data, and would ask that you not be repetitive. Troy?
Yep, Mr. Chair, we traditionally do in-room speakers first, but the group from Clam Bay has asked that we let their member on Zoom go first.
Sure.
As he wants to lead off. So Patrick Wack, Patrick, you're being prompted to unmute yourself, if you'll do so at this time. And there you go.
I'm unmuted.
Yeah, Patrick, you have 3 minutes, sir.
I'll be less than that. Thanks for your time, Patrick Wack, President of the Seagate Association in Naples, joined by many members of our community in Naples K. As you know, Clam Bay is our backyard, and thank you for organizing this. It's also a valuable county resource. I think to us, the fundamental issue is our communities have no representation with regard to the water quality, ecological health of the dredging of the bay. You all know what happened in 2016. Essentially, control was given to Pelican Bay. We're having this meeting because we've been very frustrated along a lot of the elements of it and feeling like we're not being heard. In addition, as you know, most of the activities are reimbursed by the county. I guess the only analogy is we're like farmers downstream where somebody else controls the water flow. We're concerned with the water quality, which is impaired, the declining ecological health. In fact, the latest environmental report showed basically no seagrass in the management of these issues. In fact, Pelican Bay Services Division board member described the latest environmental report as sobering. As you know, we spent our old money to start an alternative engineering analysis. We'll have another speaker which will get into some of these suggestions. I'm not going to repeat this too much, but we all know the bay is shallow. And in 2022, when during a dredging operation, there was an unauthorized land bridge, our water flow was shut off for 6 weeks and very detrimental. Listen, our goal today is not to, suggest overly specific environmental solutions. It's very complicated. There's mangrove maintenance, dredging, dune restoration, the use of fertilizers, reclaimed irrigation water that all require, I think, per Commissioner McDaniel's comment, a fresh look. And we feel just so strongly this look requires the equal representation for all stakeholders, including to some degree the county. Therefore, we ask the following, that there's the creation of a Clam Bay Advisory Committee to oversee and advise the county on all issues related to the bay's water quality, ecological health, and dredging. We just believe this is fair. It brings more brain power to this complex problem in the hopes of finding a solution to this treasured piece of real estate and our backyard. So we just feel very strongly that almost more than anything, that's the fundamental issue here. So thank you for your time.
Your next speaker is Catherine Cunningham. She'll be followed by Susan DeVoe.
Good morning. Thank you for your time and attention to this issue. I just wanted to pick up on Patrick's description of this as our backyard. It's literally our backyard. We bought our home in Seagate 14 years ago. We've lived there most of that time. We did lose our home in Hurricane Ian, so we've been out of our house for the past 2.5 years. And quite honestly, we can't wait to come back. And the reason that we can't wait to come back is this is a beautiful place. This backyard, this environmentally protected area is absolutely beautiful, and we can't wait to come back. We're in the middle of rebuilding our home. We hope it'll be finished this year. We have a long time span living here. We're full-time residents. We're really looking forward to having this be our backyard. I think all of us really think that the most important part is protecting the health and the well-being of this environmental system. We do also use the bay. We use it in all kinds of different ways. When we first bought our home 14 years ago, we had a kayak and we had a small Boston whaler. We've long since sold the whaler, sold the kayak. We picked up a small fishing boat from a neighbor who gave us this little plastic boat that our kids learned to drive when they were little, 5-horsepower motor. We've also had Sea-Doos. We currently have a couple of paddle boards, and we have a 23-foot Panga motorboat. So we use the bay in all of these ways, and we don't see it as a fight between the use for navigation and the environment. We think all of these uses are important. We all love the bay. I think our neighbors in Pelican Bay love this bay as well. I've got family members, friends, clients. My office is in Pelican Bay. I think we all have an interest in protecting it and making it better in the future. So thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Your next speaker is Susan DeVoe. She'll be followed by Joanne Janney.
Hang on, Ms. Cunningham.
Ma'am?
Have a commissioner has a
Just ask you
question for
quick
you.
question. I've only talked to a few people, more than a few, but got you right in front of me here. You say, you lost your house in Ann and you're rebuilding it. Just out of my own curiosity and education, what changes did you make to your new house, compared to the damage? Because, some people aren't making many changes, and it's like, okay, this is going to happen and again, but I have a feeling you probably didn't do that. I can tell just by your presentation. Just give me the short version, and it's more for my own, education as to, people that got hit hard and then had to totally rebuild that you did. What's different? I mean, was your house totally gone, or you had a little bit of the structure left, and now you've, been sort of, rebuilding what was left?
We had nearly 5 feet of water in our home.
Okay.
It was an original 1969 ranch house. It was about 2,800 square feet. It was basically destroyed. The structure was still there. My husband and I did have a conversation about whether we could save it. We decided not to do that because of the risk it would happen again. So the number one change we made, you could probably guess. Yeah. We elevated elevation. It. So it used to be about 6 feet above sea level. It's now 14 feet above sea level. One issue that we did run into is in trying to elevate the garage. There are limits in how much you can elevate the garage, and we were able to elevate a couple of feet. It would be helpful if we could elevate more. With the home, quite honestly, we would have gone higher than 14 feet, but we hit the ceiling. So that, yeah, we did. We built it as high as we could, and quite honestly, it seems to me it'd be nice if we could go higher.
Any big insurance nightmares, FEMA, anything, short version, just to get it directly from?
Let's move on.
Well,
Let's move on.
I'd like to hear her
I'd
answer.
love to very quickly answer this. Lori Bassano is the best insurance agent in the world, and she's great. Our claim was filed while the storm was happening. We got full value on our claim without any fight or hassle. That said, it's about 10% of what we needed to repay.
Can we move on now, Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you,
Let's
ma'am.
move on to the topic.
Your next speaker is Susan DeVoe. She'll be followed by Joanne Janney.
Hey, Penny.
All right, hi, I'm Susan DeVoe. I'm a Seagate board member. As we've already discussed, for a small inlet, it's important to have optimal dredging to promote the flushing. Even small improvements can make a big difference. On average, the current dredging only achieves 60% of the theoretical maximal flow. Other approaches might increase this. To evaluate this, we spent a significant sum of our own money on independent analysis. We hired Taylor Engineering to examine historical data and meet with Pelican Bay's engineer. As a result, they're making three recommendations. So Taylor is making 3 recommendations. That there should be a planned annual dredge before turtle nesting season, which is May 1st. The current scheme has a variable time frame of 12 to 24 months, and it's more reactive, and it often runs into delays, as we are experiencing now. Delays increase the risk of closure and have resulted in unnecessary periods of reduced flow. The dredge should be consistent throughout the entire allowable area. Recently, it's been limited to about 50% or less of the inlet. And number 3, there should be a computer modeling of the alternate dredging configurations. This is very standard and to our knowledge has never been done. This would cost approximately $75,000. Our goal would be to find a plan to allow more tidal flow. For sure, there are complexities which each of these items which go beyond the scope of this meeting. However, for the health of the system, we believe that our suggestions should be thoroughly and independently evaluated in parallel with the March 2026 permit renewal. So we've been able to be involved in several of the Pelican Bay Services Division meetings. We've brought this up several times, and it feels like everything runs in slow motion. So it was brought up last, I think it was November, that we were exploring the dredge, and then it was put off and put off and put off, and now we are into turtle nesting season, so now it's going to be in November. My concern is in waiting for this kind of behemoth process to keep moving forward, mangroves have suffered and are dying, as several of us discussed. And I think that I think it was it you, Mr. Sanders, that brought up, or Mr. Hall, that brought up what would happen if we just let them all die, and there would be a breach there. You know, half of me says, great, let's do it, because then I've got, you know, Gulf property. But it's not the right thing to do, because as we all know, that I think the number one thing is the mangrove health, in that they're carbon eaters, and that they're also the infrastructure in keeping the sand where it's supposed to be, and also a habitat for young wildlife. And that's all I have to say today.
Thank you.
Your next speaker is Joanne Janney. She'll be followed by Scott Schultz. Pardon me? You will have to go to that podium and give it to the young lady over there.
Good morning. I'm Joanne Janney from Naples Cay. As a Florida Master Naturalist and a volunteer for Collier County Parks and Recreation, I spend almost every day in Clam Pass Park. In addition to our community's lack of say in matters relative to my backyard, I'm very concerned about the well-documented water quality and ecological issues. Although unfortunately the water quality of many estuaries in Southwest Florida are considered impaired, I do not believe that's the reason to continue with business as usual. Furthermore, since 2016, the mangrove and seagrass health in the park has declined, even before the recent hurricanes. The slow degradation of the system has many causes, some natural and others man-made. However, we believe that there needs to be more attention on two aspects. First, controlling excessive nutrient levels entering the system, and two, inadequate flushing of the bay. The former is partially related to the county's use of reclaimed water for irrigation. For example, Pelican Bay's nutrient levels are multiple times that of Clam Bay. Inadequate flushing is partially due to suboptimal dredging processes. Our engineers have made some recommendations with regard to the dredging. There are additional environmental issues. For example, there's a strip of hurricane-damaged mangroves that in all of Collier County was targeted by the U.S. Army Corps as an area of restoration. If that breaches, the park will become an island, and my fellow homeowners in Naples Cay may be at risk. With the Army Corps study on hold, we've been told that the county and PBSD have a joint responsibility for this damaged area. Yet when I inquire about getting plants or dune plantings there to help protect the area, even the county representatives don't seem clear about who has responsibility for this. Second example, there are large areas of dying mangroves with standing water that have been trapped in there since Hurricane Ian. I brought this to the attention of the PBSD environmental consultants for the Bay and to the attention of the PBSD Water Committee at several meetings last year and the year before. It was finally noted in the last monitoring report as issued a few weeks ago. These mangroves will not likely come back, even if the channels are dug out now. It's a fragile system, and it needs more urgent care and response. I do realize that over 500 acres of mangrove areas under the NRPA that the PBSD has responsibility for. That's a lot to deal with, but there is only one small area south of Clam Pass Inlet on their list of mangrove areas that they regularly monitor. And if it isn't on the radar, it's never going to make it to a remediation list. Maybe the PBSD needs more funding to do the hard work that needs to be done to protect this fragile area. But something needs to happen much sooner than waiting years to address the issues. Otherwise, the cost of restoration will be even more significant as areas continue to deteriorate. In addition to a fundamental issue of fairness, I believe a broader representation for our surrounding communities, including perhaps an independent environmental consultant, will produce a better result for the health of this estuary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your next speaker is Scott Schultz, who will be followed by John Cross.
Hello there. I'm Scott Schultz, 60 Seagate Drive in Naples Cay. Live in Bay Point, specifically the building there. Also the chairman of your Collier County Coastal Storm Risk Management Ad Hoc Advisory Committee. Whew. And we're sitting on the ice cube now, nice and cold, and waiting for the Army to come back with more funds. So I'm somewhat familiar with this. I got to meet Mr. Wack, Patrick Wack, in my endeavors as chairman. I went to meet with 14 of the 18 HOAs throughout Naples, and found him to be one of the most earnest folks that I have dealt with. I am concerned again, though, with the issues that are coming back. My activities in this project began with the first Army Corps project, which people wanted sluice gates and walls and all sorts of good stuff. And I hear about building concrete on the beaches. It sort of scares the daylights out of me. But nonetheless, some folks believe that fortification of a place is possible. Mr. Commissioner LaCastro, forts, I think you know a little bit about those. You can't fortify against a storm. I don't believe it's really possible to do that. Hurricane Ian, I was in the building when that hurricane hit, and we got more stuff up from the drains, from Clam Bay, and from the canals that hit our building. We didn't get blasted from the ocean. We got blasted from the side, from underneath, and from behind. That's never been remedied, and I'm sure that those pipes haven't been dredged. They all came up and were all sort of human effluent in there, so it was quite a mess. But nonetheless, the ability to put sand back on the beach over concrete and run it at length, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I know folks are scared and folks need protection, but concrete on the beach is something I just don't make any sense with, in my judgment. But if there is a plan to move forward with Clam Pass and Clam Bay with being some volunteer committee, given the experience I've had the last 2.5 years representing you all, I'd be glad to volunteer to serve on that committee. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Your next speaker is John Cross. He'll be followed by Sue Black.
Hi, thank you. Some of you may know me. I'm the chair of the Planning Advisory Board, the City of Naples. I just want to reemphasize one point, and that is that the approach that has been taken is, with Clam Pass, is wait until there's a problem. Wait until we have to dredge. Then go about the process of applying for a permit and ultimately dredging, which takes the better part of a year at least. So you have a situation where Clam Bay is threatened, mangroves are dying, you dredge. Then you wait for Clam Bay to be threatened, mangroves are dying, a year later you dredge. And we should have a higher standard for maintenance of Clam Bay. There should be an annual dredging, and the criteria should be health. The criteria should be maintain the health of Clam Bay, not wait until Clam Bay is threatened, wait until Clam Bay is in poor condition, and then solve the problem. That isn't responsible stewardship of a natural resource. And that really is the only point I would like to make. Thank you.
I have a quick, before you go, sir.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Forgive me, Mr. Chair, I didn't hit my button while he was. I'll make it a good question, I promise. Concur with what you're saying, absolutely. While we're working on the second portion of what you were discussing, which is the long-term plan, work with us to ensure the highest quality of freshwater runoff that's coming out of the northern end of the city of Naples as is possible, please.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I should add, the city of Naples, I think the number one financial priority and municipal priority in the city of Naples is water quality. The city is spending, I believe, about $200 million on the stormwater outfalls and on the cleanup of lakes. The city of Naples is committed to water quality. They realize that the experience of the outdoors, the experience of the beach is foundational to the economy of Collier County. Without it, we're all, we let this, if we don't take care of what we have, we're, tourism is out the window, real estate values are out the window. It's economically it's an economic necessity that we care for what we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your next speaker is Sue Black. She'll be followed on Zoom by your final speaker, Mary McLean Johnson.
Good morning, resident of Seagate for 24 years, and I'm just common sense kind of girl. So if you look at this picture that's currently on the display, you'll see a nice shade of upper clam bay, a nice shade of inner clam bay, and all of a sudden we see outer clam bay. It's a little bit different. It's green. I'm a visual learner. And also what I've told my kids through the years is when you want to get something done, take baby steps. The approach that we're taking right now, disaster, big step. Disaster, big step. Why don't we have an annual dredge? That way, if a storm hits, it won't be catastrophic. We will do a dredge, minor dredge, as opposed to getting these big trucks in there, the hydraulic, I'm not sure the science about it, but just watching these machines on the beach, it's just too much for our system. So ever since the storm, the speaker from Naples Cay, she said that there's a ridge of sand that flew over on Ian. If you guys go back there, there's a ledge now of sand, and all those mangroves in front are dying. So Outer Clams Bay has to be addressed right now. So I'm in support of an annual dredge, taking baby steps every year. Just take out a little bit, take out a little bit, take out a little bit. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your final speaker is Mary McLean Johnson, who is on Zoom. You've been asked to unmute yourself, Mary, if you'll do so at this time. Yeah, you're unmuted. You have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Good morning. I am a resident of Pelican Bay for more than 20 years, and also a member of the Mangrove Action Group, which is a group of conservationists from Pelican Bay and outside who are interested in monitoring the health of Clam Bay and the mangroves. And we've been active for the past, since really the mangrove die-off in the early mid-1990s, and really stimulated the county and PBSD to institute management of Clam Bay. Since that time, the mangrove die-off, which had reached 54 acres, was restored under PBSD's first management and permit. And PBSD has continued to manage Clam Bay in a way that is responsible and that takes into consideration the entire ecosystem. It is a holistic approach. And in the past, for example, when the plan was revised in 2014, the planning process was open to the entire community of Collier County, including Seagate, and many people participated in that planning process that led to the current parameters for dredging. I do not think it's correct to say that the PBSD waits until there's a problem and mangroves are dying and then steps into dredge. Rather, it has established a system of monitoring that carefully considers when the parameters indicate a dredging is needed and it's timed appropriately. I'm sure everyone realizes that dredging is very, very expensive. So if you dredge before the summer storm season, it's very likely that a hurricane could come and fill in what you've just dredged out. Similarly, what they're looking at now in November dredging will help protect the ecosystem through the winter when there are also storms. So the timing of the dredging is very carefully considered according to parameters that are constantly monitored. The latest concern about Outer Clam Bay and the collapse of the dune system is very worrying. And people of Pelican Bay share that concern with people of Naples Cay and Seagate. And we are at the PBSD is right now considering all the options as to what can be done to restore that stretch. Similarly, they're looking at what can be done to increase the hand-dug channels in Outer Clam Bay that will help release the water and maintain the health of that section. So the Pelican Bay Services Division is a county division. It is open to input from everyone in the county. And I think that Pelican Bay Services Division's record of management of Clam Bay is stellar. And a lot of this criticism, I think, needs to look at what other water quality contributors may be coming in. And, Neil Durrell mentioned some of the issues with dredging perhaps and cleanup being needed in the Seagate canals as a factor affecting water quality. So I urge people to work through the Pelican Bay Services Division. They have an extensive history of successful management of Clam Bay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
And that was your final registered speaker.
We're in a workshop, so we can't make any decisions, but we can give direction to staff in terms of future meetings. So, Commissioner McDaniel, you're lit up.
I just have one quick point that I'd like to make. The nice lady from Naples K, would you put up her picture on the visual, Miss Amy? That one? The one that's there? And then we were given a copy of a map of a photo from 2008. Yeah, it was 2018. March 19th of 2018. And I just want to show the strip of mangroves that goes north from Naples K that was there in 2018 that is not now. And so therefore in lies why we're here today and the conversations that we're having going forward. I mean, restoration of mangroves is really nice, but we can't control what Mother Nature is going to, in fact, hand us on a regular basis. So, and I really appreciate the comments that came with regard to baby steps, consistency, with regard to our management efforts, our dredging efforts, and what we're, in fact, doing all the way across the board. There's no argument that PBSD has done an amazing job with the monitoring efforts with what, in fact, is transpiring. We need to know from you, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Doral, I know you're hiding right now, but we need to know from you what we can do to help you with regard to these steps along the way for the overall health of the entire system, not just upper, lower, inner, all of that.
No, I think going back to some of my opening comments, I think the most important thing that we need to do is to renew the existing permits. Amen. But then commit ourselves to evaluate reasonable amendments and to rethink some of the engineering, or at least investigate it. This is an oversimplification, but the reason that we don't dredge it every year is the same reason that I don't replace the tires on my car every year. It's not warranted. And there's a huge difference between having a desire and having the ability to get permits to do it that are tied to the management plan that is in place. And it's just a time-consuming thing. We have already committed to do the full bathymetric survey and provide that to Seagate. We've already committed to evaluate areas of concern following Ian of mangrove die-off in your regional park. We are the entity who's got a proven track record of being able to reclaim and regrow mangroves. I can make a really good argument, though, that the county's general fund needs to help contribute some money, or the unincorporated area general fund, and not the people of Pelican Bay when it comes to restoring or reclaiming the regional park that is there. That's kind of a detail to work out with the county manager and see what she prefers. So kind of a three-part process, but the first element is to get the permit. Second element is to evaluate amendments to the permit long-term for the next 15 years. Area number 3, though, is to also evaluate what, if anything, the city is going to do with the Seagate drainage system, because frankly, the stormwater system and the street stormwater system are a first-generation shotgun discharge straight into the canals. There's no water retention. There are no detention facilities. And so to a certain extent, the sediment and the water quality issues within the south end of what we're talking about are because they were built in the 1960s at the same time that they were dredging and filling. And so when it rains, the water goes straight to the canal and thus the problem. And I think that the people in Pelican Bay have a 40-year history of taxing themselves to provide world-class amenities, and in particular have been good stewards of the system. So I think there's kind of a three tasks going forward, and that'd be our recommendations.
Commissioner Colwell.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have two questions. I'm not 100% sure, but where's the majority of the funding source come from for the actual dredging project itself?
It all comes from TERS taxes.
Okay, all right. And I guess second question, I want to try to reapproach because it just peaked when Commissioner Hall had asked a question about that. I think it's the area at R43. And if you look at that, it almost looks like at one point, maybe Mother Nature at some point, that was a natural flow in and out because of the way that is saddled, because evidently that's a deeper part in the Outer Bay. You know, it's like a V shape right at 43 or 43.
My understanding is that there was never one there, but there was, if you look at the inlet on that same flow, look at the actual inlet, just east of the inlet is sort of a little mangrove peninsula. At one time in the last 15 years, there was a second channel that fed and went down to Outer Clam Bay. It sort of bypassed Section B and Section C. As soon as you got inside the inlet, it made a hard right, and you can see it's still there, but it has filled in partially, and that's one of those things that I'm talking about long-term that needs to evaluate. That contributed a source of incoming salt water that was more apt to end up in Outer Clam Bay and in the south end of the system, and we've got aerial records of that would be evaluated at that time.
Because we all know, well, your own expert said that from point A to point B, our flow doesn't change much, right? So we know that. So that being a second source of salt water coming in, it may be a healthy thing for it if that is a possibility in the future.
And historic.
Historic.
Because at the end of the day, I've got to convince the agencies that what we're doing is not altering a system without some historic reference to be able to point to benefits.
I was just curious because just you look at that design and the way it V's into the actual mangroves, and there's not much room, even in that newer picture. It's pretty much right up onto the beach. I like to use little anecdotes too, and I liked your tire one, but you know, in reality is if you put an extra 60,000 miles on your car that year, you might want to change your tires. Mother Nature's not stagnant. She's fluid. From year to year, she changes. So I'm just, you know, food for thought.
I put tires on my wife's car before I put them on my own.
Commissioner McDaniel.
And I have to get over the changing the tire thing. Forgive me 1 second. Historically is what we need to be talking about, Mr. Doyle. You know as well as I do, and I said it at the beginning of this, Seagate used to have deep water access for all of those homes that are up in there. It's no longer there. We have to look at the history with regard to it. We have to look at the seagrass that's been created by that fancy word you used. I think my word was, I had a different word before, but you used a fancy word for the creation of seagrass that is there now that thou shalt no longer destroy. Has there been any exploration in an MSTU for the northern portion of the city with regard to contribution for water quality that's coming out of that particular area, for the substandard drainage system that's coming out of that area, with regard to the freshwater runoff that's coming in? Because that has an impact on the seagrass. Thou shalt not harm the seagrass, but also if you're putting high nutrient loaded water coming in off of the land, that's going to have as large, if not a larger, detriment to the seagrass than anything.
That and turbidity. Grass needs light to grow, and as a result of sediment that gets stirred up, especially during tropical storm and hurricane and cold front season, cloudy water is one of the leading contributors to seagrass decline. And so anything that we can do to improve clarity as part of the water quality issue is smart. But your main point is, would our board welcome some sort of cost sharing or interlocal agreement with the city? I think the county and the city have a long history of interlocal agreements, but up to this point, that was also my point that was intended to say that The Seagate system needs some maintenance of its own, and it has not been maintained since probably the 1960s or the early 1970s.
All right. As I mentioned, we're in a workshop, so we can't make any decisions, but we can give some direction to staff, and no one else is lit up here, so I'm going to spend just a couple minutes. The idea of creating an advisory board, I think it's a good idea. I'm not sure how that would be structured, but it would be purely a board that would meet to give advice to the county commission and to the Pelican Bay folks. That board would have no authority but to study an issue and report back to us. So I'd like to see if the manager would place on an agenda item, and I'll see if the board agrees with this, an item to discuss the creation of that type of an advisory board to report back to the county commission and to Pelican Bay on issues dealing with Clam Bay. Ms. Patterson, is that something that would be reasonable and something that you could evaluate and kind of report back to us on?
Yes, sir. I'll work with the county attorney and we'll bring something back.
All right. If there's nothing else on this particular issue, then we're going to be in recess until, we'll say 10 minutes till 11. You have one more point?
One quick point.
Commissioner McDaniel?
Only just as additional direction, if you all are of the mind, I would not only like to have the advice with regard to how and what and when we need to be doing, but I also would like to exploration of funding sources. It
Right.
isn't the total responsibility of Pelican Bay or the county or the city. We're all in this together.
All right. We will be in recess until 10:50.
Chair, you have a live mic.
Thank you. We're going to get into the county landfill. I'm going to suggest, just in the interest of, I've said this before, the shortness of human life, let's not spend time on the history. I think we've read this and we understand that. I think the real issue is what are we going to be doing going forward. So if we could start at that point, I think, unless there's some objection, I would ask that we do that.
No, that we can do that, Commissioner. We'll fast forward through a few slides and get to that point. And good morning, Commissioners. Thanks for your time today. For the record, my name is Carrie Hodson. I'm your Director for Solid and Hazardous Waste. And as mentioned, we're here today to talk about long-term solid waste management disposal. When most people put out their garbage, all they really want is for it to disappear. Once collected, it's out of sight, out of mind. Moreover, they want it responsibly managed. To see how our wastes are managed responsibly, I would like to invite each of you to tour our county landfill, a recycling center, or the Immokalee transfer station. A tour will give you a visual perspective behind today's presentation, as one cell remains to be lined before the landfill expands vertically. Solid waste has a great presence and engagement in our community, with providing over 170 tours last year at our county's landfill for businesses, community, specialized leadership groups, as well as universities, public, private, and homeschooled groups. As you heard earlier, the constituents of Collier County care about preserving our paradise, and the policy actions that come from today's workshop can serve for the future generations of Collier County. Commissioners, this is the third solid waste workshop that has convened in Collier County. Extensive research, evaluation, and analysis has gone into the presentation that you'll hear today. The supporting information, including a recent report from FTEP, as well as several major universities in Florida regarding landfill capacity in Florida, can be found on the agenda portal. We also have a binder representing a lot of the backup research that's went into this presentation for today. I'd like to thank our Public Utilities Director, Dr. George Yilmaz, and our County Manager for their support to bring this topic to the board today. Leading today's presentation will be our solid waste industry expert, Mr. Daniel Deitch, who's worked on various projects with Collier County over the past 20 years. And with that, I will hand it off to Daniel Deitch. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Carrie. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioner, professional staff, and citizens of Collier County who may be out there. For the record, as Carrie said, I am Daniel Deitch, a solid waste planning consultant with SCS Engineers. I am joined today by some key members of our project delivery team, Dr. George Yilmaz and Carrie Hodgkins and Bart Zauke. And we appreciate this opportunity to participate in this workshop. We want to keep this informal and conversational, and consistent with your direction, we're going to skip some slides, and I'll work with Troy to make sure that we accomplish that. We know the magnitude of this topic, so we want to be clear-eyed about the challenges and the opportunities before you. We also want to set the intention that we do plan to return to you for policy direction based on your feedback today. Next slide, please. Should be slide 2. Let me start with an overview of the items that we will discuss today. We're going to touch on the workshop purpose and the bottom line. We are going to skip over the history and many parts of your current system. And we really want to focus on the long-term options, and we'll regroup with policy direction and action items. Next slide, please. The county has made great progress over the past few decades that we will not touch on, but it's in your briefing package. But a true long-term disposal solution has not yet been realized, and the options decrease as your population growth continues. So long-term disposal is an important matter and critically important to secure a best value approach before the county faces a crisis. I should share that the needs extend well beyond any single election cycle, and it requires an understanding of the issues and opportunities to achieve a true long-term best value solution. So why are we here today? We want to have a conversation about a few items related to solid waste management that we will come back to you. And those 3 areas are, 1, amending County Ordinance 2005-54 to create a single solid waste district comprised of municipal service benefit units 1 and 2. The second is to align the landfill operating agreement with your integrated solid waste management strategy. And third is to achieve concurrence on the preferred option or options to control your long-range solid waste management destiny in terms of future solid waste disposal capacity. It is also important to note that our discussion today is consistent with the county manager's strategic plan related to solid waste, which is to provide services and programs that sustainably manage the county's solid waste. All right. Troy, if we could advance to slide 12. And I just think it's important that we acknowledge where you are today. And this slide simply reflects the results or the benefits of implementing your current solid waste strategy. So significantly, Collier County is one of 3 counties in the state of Florida that is meeting or exceeding the state of Florida's 75% recycling goal. This achievement is a testament to having an integrated solid waste management strategy, a long and connected history of solid waste leadership, and capable partners that provide contracted best value solid waste services. Next slide, please. So let's turn our attention to action item 1, which is essentially a housekeeping item to amend County Ordinance 2005-54 to create a single solid waste district comprised of municipal service benefit units 1 and 2. It doesn't practically change anything at this point, but it does allow for service level parity, administrative efficiency, reduced ambiguity to the customer, and affords greater flexibility for disposal if needed, which can best be accomplished with a single solid waste district. Next slide, please. The second action item is to align the landfill operating agreement with your integrated solid waste management strategy. Historically, the landfill operating agreement has focused on operations and odor management. As important as that focus is, preserving disposal capacity is also critically important. Currently, the landfill operating agreement does not have any standards for waste compaction, so there is little incentive to preserve airspace from an operational standpoint. And as we know, the greatest population growth is planned for the northeast portion of the county. One critical focus area is to optimize the disposal operations at the Collier County landfill. This can best be accomplished by aligning the landfill operating agreement with the integrated solid waste management strategy, including establishing a performance specification for in-place waste density. It also means securing new long-term disposal agreements for solid waste and disaster-related debris that prioritize operational flexibility, again, before a crisis arises. Next slide, please.
Hey, Daniel, can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
Back on the action item number 1, you said something about ambiguity to the customers or something. What did you say about the customers?
Yeah, so because we have commissioner districts, a lot of our customers think that when we refer to districts for collection, they think that we're referring to your districts. So we would like to remove that ambiguity. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's now turn our attention to action item 3, which is controlling your long-range solid waste management destiny. And this is a challenge that is not unique to Collier County. There are several long-term disposal options that were explored by your staff that we will discuss. These options include, Troy, if you could advance through, out-of-county disposal, a new landfill technology conversion, landfill reclamation, and expanding your existing landfills.
You can keep going through those, Troy.
Yep, until we get to the next slide.
There you go.
And okay, here we are. So we're going to start with out-of-county disposal, and based on our analysis, we found that Marion County is the only county comparable in population to Collier County that does not provide final disposal of solid waste within their county. Out-of-county disposal requires infrastructure such as rail lines and/or transfer stations, and we have looked at all of the rail lines, both current and abandoned, and found that all options are cost prohibitive. Also, the county only has one transfer station, which is located at the Immokalee landfill, and it would need to be improved to manage any more waste generated in District 2 than is currently managed. Further, a new transfer station would be required at the Resource Recovery Business Park in District 1, immediately north of the Collier County landfill. Still, we must be sensitive to the impacts of transferring waste out of county, especially traffic. A rule of thumb is that 1,000 tons, which is what goes to the Collier County landfill each day, would require more than 50 tractor trailers on the roads, and that would adversely impact the quality of life for many in the county, as well as increase road maintenance requirements. Also, significantly, the closest private landfill is approximately 2.5 hours away, one way. It's a tremendous impact not just in Collier County, but for every community along the way and back. Also, the cost to transfer waste out of county is approximately 135% greater than managing it within the county. In addition, when waste is transferred out of county, the county assumes risks that are different than for in-county disposal. These include the fact that the county would assume liability for every other source of solid waste that is disposed of at that landfill, as well as the risk of an unplanned closure of that disposal facility. So the bottom line is that out-of-county disposal alone is not controlling your solid waste destiny. Next slide, please. Next, we're going to talk about a new landfill. The idea of a new landfill has been discussed and explored over at least the last 30 years. Going back to the late 90s, 3 properties were presented to the county commission to be explored as potential sites, but unfortunately the county was sued for the potential acquisition. At that time, the commission directed staff to instead focus on recycling and maximizing existing assets. That has absolutely worked and bought some time. Developing a new landfill is challenging, as evidenced by the length of time since the last new municipal landfill opened in Florida, which was in 1998. That's just to the north of us in Sarasota County. Siting a new landfill is no easy task. However, landfills generally have lower capital costs and operational costs compared to other volume reduction or management alternatives such as waste to energy. It typically takes 10 years or more to site, permit, and construct a new landfill. Ideally, if you're going through that effort, you're going to want a site that is large enough to earn a decent return on your investment. We typically look for a site that is 1,000 acres or more, recognizing that much of the space would serve as a buffer to separate on-site activities from the off-site uses. This is important, especially as more and more communities are expanding and as Collier County continues to be developed. Still, siting is the single greatest challenge. However, it will certainly be easier today than it will be in the future because we know that land scarcity is going to increase rather than decrease going forward. But we also have to be clear that there will be public opposition to a new landfill. Regardless, a new landfill is controlling your solid waste management destiny, but it is often described as the fight of a lifetime. Next slide, please. Next, I'll talk about technology conversion. The county has explored thermal conversion technologies over the last 40 years. The conclusion of a lot of work is that only mass burn and refuse-derived fuel waste energy facilities are commercially proven volume reduction systems. And even with the use of such an approach, a landfill is still needed to dispose of the ash that is generated from the combustion process. Collier County has been down this road before. In 1985, the county issued bonds for a new waste energy facility, and just 5 years later, the concept was abandoned and the bonds were closed. At the turn of the century, the commission directed staff to discuss a waste energy partnership with Lee County, and at that time, Lee County was not interested. Then in 2002, the county issued a solicitation for a large capacity thermal conversion technology, which was ultimately abandoned due to the high costs. While there are many interesting thermal conversion concepts that are being touted, only mass burn and refuse-derived fuel waste energy systems are operating on a commercial scale with the proven reliability needed to manage the solid waste that is generated in Collier County every day.
So, can you say that last statement again?
Sure. When only, I will read it verbatim, and then I will explain it further. Only mass burn and refuse-derived fuel waste energy systems are operating on a commercial scale with the proven reliability needed to manage the solid waste that is generated every day in Collier County. Still, to be responsive to the marketplace and to keep abreast of opportunities, Collier County recently issued a request for expressions of interest to technology firms worldwide. The responses varied, but the only thermal systems that operate commercially are traditional waste to energy. Now, Palm Beach County has taken a different approach than Collier County. They also have an integrated solid waste management system with waste to energy as its primary volume reduction technology. They tried to develop a new landfill in the western portion of their county about 15 years ago. But there was a lot of concern, and by concern I mean outrage, from interested parties about a landfill located there. The county ultimately abandoned their plans to develop a new landfill, sold the land and instead built a new mass burn waste-to-energy facility at a cost of nearly $700 million. And now they're planning to replace their original refuse-derived fuel waste-to-energy facility when it reaches the end of its useful life and replace it with a new mass burn waste-to-energy facility. As you may be aware, Miami-Dade County is going through similar challenges right now. Their refuse-derived fuel waste-to-energy facility suffered a fire 2 years ago, and it has remained closed since, and it has changed their solid waste management system dramatically. The county has been unable to select a site for a new waste-to-energy facility, and while they are now exploring other opportunities, even though waste-to-energy was their preferred path forward, they are now looking at landfills, and specifically landfilling outside of the county. It is our belief that using a conversion technology is controlling your solid waste management destiny, but it is not advisable, due in part to the amount of waste that Collier County has remaining after recycling. It simply doesn't achieve the economies of scale that make these sorts of technologies cost-effective. Next, we'll talk about landfill reclamation.
Just one moment, please. Sure. Commissioner Hall.
Thank you. It seems to me like we've been getting emails from one company or maybe two that they want to take our trash and do something with it and do it on their dime. I never have really gotten into it. I think I probably just forwarded those to Dr. George. What is that guy all about? And would that help? Would that be helpful to us in, or maybe doing a hybrid system?
Yeah, so I think I'm familiar with the company, or the consortium that you're referring to. We have, part of the reason that we conducted the request for expressions of interest, which is really the lowest level in terms of effort of solicitation, we asked for information. Where have they done it before? Where they're processing municipal solid waste, either a portion of what Collier County generates or all of what Collier County generates. And unfortunately, the technology has not been demonstrated to manage waste on a consistent basis and at a commercial scale. And we asked for those reference projects so that we could be diligent in our analysis. The handful of responses that were received, we ranked them in terms of technology readiness. And believe me, not just the consulting team, your entire team is always looking out over the horizon to see where the emerging technologies are. And it's often described as we want to be on the leading edge, but not the bleeding edge. So oftentimes you may want to consider being the second entity that has adopted the next greatest technology. But our assessment is that mass burn, waste energy, and refuse-derived fuel are proven. They have an operating record in the United States over many, many decades. I'll also share that there's a lot of technologies that are being adapted from other industries. And solid waste is not like, for example, gasification is well proven in the coal industry. But coal, you can have a consistent particle size, consistent dryness, right? So the attributes of that material are very different than municipal solid waste.
What was that guy's technology? It was not burn?
It was three-phase microwave reactors.
Yeah, microwave.
Okay.
Commissioner McDaniel.
And this is just a quick clarification for me when I was reading ahead, as Ms. Carey suggested that I do. In this total amount of collected tons, is the total recycling tons part of that dark blue, or is it in addition to the dark blue?
That is the recycling tons only. Let me double check.
Because that doesn't answer my question.
I apologize.
Don't be sorry. I want a clarification, because to me it looks like if the dark blue is our total tons collected and the light blue is the total tons recycled, that means about 20% of our total collected needs to be disposed of in some form or format, because we're manipulating about 80% of our collections are being recycled.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct. The dark blue is the total tons collected, and the light blue is part of those total tons collected.
Very good. Thank you.
And let me ask you another question, other technologies. Have we explored any technologies out of Europe or other countries? I say that because, just take nuclear, for example. France is almost all nuclear power for electricity. They're way ahead of us. Are there other countries that are doing things a little differently? Has that been explored?
Yes, but not for solid waste, municipal solid waste. There are technologies that, for example, in Japan, that are processing quote-unquote select waste. So that there's a lot of pre-processing and segregation and then manipulation of the material to make it more uniform, so more homogeneous rather than heterogeneous. But that is not what you're generating here, right? When it's picked up at the curb, it is commingled. Well, to be kind, it's heterogeneous. So
the reason I mention that is, obviously you do a request for some interest. You're going to get some presentations, but I don't know how broad that would have gone. And at some point, we might want to just take a look at what they're doing in other countries.
yeah, and I'm going to remind Dr. George, because he went on a world tour back in 2002 when the county issued a solicitation for an emerging conversion technology system. And there were facilities operating in Germany, in Italy, that unfortunately were no longer operating. Or at this point, they're no longer operating. But yeah, we're regularly looking out over the horizon, not just in Florida, not just in the United States, but globally. And that was the intention with the request for expressions of interest through the procurement system to announce it to the world that Collier County.
I guess if there's a worldwide trip that comes up, Dr. George probably won't be the representative going. It'll probably be, some commissioner. Well, no, just
Yeah, maybe the chairman.
To add to that, when we look at the technologies that have been presented, and these companies did respond to our request of our expressions for interest, we look at the applicability to Collier County. We have to look at the waste generation, if there's opportunities for partnerships, but again, ensuring that it's proven as well, and the types of collection we have, and if that would also need to be impacted by the technology or the alternative disposal that's presented to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So Collier County has a rich history with landfill reclamation. It is an approach that is typically used to address an environmental liability and is not commonly used to reclaim airspace at modern landfills. Reclamation has been performed twice for unlined portions of the Collier County landfill. The first section that was reclaimed was associated with an old county gun range, and there was lead contamination. Then subsequently, a 22-acre area was reclaimed to allow for the build-out of the new lined disposal cells at the Collier County landfill. In both cases, what it provided was the removal of an environmental hazard that cleared the way for your planned landfill development. With the Immokalee landfill, it's a very different situation. That is an unlined, enclosed landfill. When I say unlined, I mean there's no liner at the bottom, just a liner at the top. And as mentioned earlier, the solid waste that is received at the Immokalee transfer station is transferred out of county to the Okeechobee landfill. Significantly, that site is located in a part of the county that is experiencing rapid and what we expect to be sustained population growth, and reclaiming the Immokalee landfill would present an opportunity to reduce an environmental liability while creating an opportunity to develop new disposal capacity for the future. Next slide, please. The Immokalee landfill reached capacity in 2003. The whole site is approximately 120 acres, and the footprint for the disposal cells is less than 21 acres. The maximum height of the site is 80 feet. The neighbors immediately to the left are a county jail and a county fleet facility, and we know that there are some challenges that we're exploring now in terms of distance to the Immokalee airport. But we also know that the surrounding sections of that site are agricultural, which would provide a great buffer. Our conclusion is that reclaiming and redeveloping the Immokalee landfill is controlling your solid waste management destiny. Next slide, please. The last option we want to explore is optimizing your existing landfill.
Before you move on with that, Daniel, Commissioner Hall?
Thank you, Chairman. I can't help but think about the Grinch. One man's trash is another man's potpourri. Is there any potential at all for maybe for something smaller like Immokalee? Is there any in the reclamation process for privatization or a private-public partnership, or is it just all on us?
As far as the disposal?
As far as just, yeah.
So Right now, we currently are contracted with Waste Management to operate the Immokalee Transfer Station as well as the Collier County landfill. As part of the action items here, we discuss as number 2, amending that landfill operating agreement to secure disposal capacity at other landfills, not just for garbage generated in Collier County, but also for hurricane debris. So we have a great partnership that's been longstanding with Waste Management as far as the operation of our disposal. But there could also be opportunities. That's why we look at these requests for information or express interest for technologies to see if there are other compatible partnerships for Collier County.
Yeah, I guess.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, similar. I mean, kind of. I guess my mind was going to, if we turned over the waste management in an area to some private company, they could basically wholesale our trash and sell it to somebody that wants to do the 3-phase microwave. You know, I didn't know if that was I'm just sitting up here freewheeling.
So, no, I appreciate the engagement. So when we put out for these expressions for interest to see, again, what kind of partnerships could exist, those could be potentials. So if the microwave theory existed and that was a partnership between either us and directly with the processor or directly with another private company then to the processor, those are all opportunities that would be explored and presented if they existed.
If we turned it over to somebody that's, you know, to a private company, if they're buying our trash from us so that they can sell it to a microwave, then they can prove the process. It's on their dime, it's on their risk, and we still get our trash moved. So that's all I was thinking about.
Yeah. And you would absolutely just want a backup plan because the garbage that's generated is generated every day and is picked up nearly every day. So you do have to make sure that it is managed responsibly every day. And I will tell you, in the solicitation that was issued in 2002, the commission at that time was interested in innovative technologies. One of the provisions in the contract, which was never consummated, was if the county provides a site for a demonstration facility, if the project never achieves substantial completion, the site has to be returned to its original state. So there are ways to incorporate safeguards so that the county is not buying undue risk.
I guess in Commissioner LaCastro's terms, I was just up here spitballing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hey, stick to the topic.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Yeah, well, and if I heard you correctly, even though the 3-phase microwave sounds pretty smurfy, it's not really viable technology. Is that what I heard?
It may very well be. It has not demonstrated as a system to process municipal solid waste the way that it is placed at the curb in Collier County or any other community.
Just because. So even though it sounds like a wonderful idea, it hasn't yet been proven to be actually viable as of yet, number one. Number two, the reason you're here today is because we do care. The board that heard this in 2002 were told they had 52 years before the landfill expired. Now we're looking at 30 years, and you've already told us what it takes to site a new landfill and go through all of the processes. So that's the reason that you're here today. We don't want to have this discussion in another 20 years and with another board, and we're like this. Now, my question for you is, you mentioned reclamation twice, but I didn't see a good synopsis of that. What actually transpires with reclamation? We've already done it once at the big landfill, or okay, twice, to correct me. What actually transpires with reclamation, or am I getting ahead of where you're going?
No, it's a timely question. I mean, it's a permitted process, and the permit is through the state of Florida, where the material is excavated and screened because historic disposal practices used a lot more soil and higher quality soil than is currently available. So you separate out the soil from the recyclable materials, and there's various mechanisms to segregate out the plastics and the metals and the like. The recyclable materials can then be processed, the soil can be stockpiled, and the waste can be placed into a new disposal cell. That's exactly what happened at the Collier County landfill, and the concept that we've been exploring is doing the same thing at Immokalee to remove that environmental liability but first develop new line cells so that excavation occurs, the screening occurs, but then that material has a place to go that is on site.
That's what I thought I heard you say. I just wanted you to say it again. I'm sorry for making you repeat yourself.
No, it's quite all right.
Commissioner Colwell.
Thank you, Chairman. So I was following what Commissioner Hall and Commissioner McDaniel were talking about the this three-phase microwave thing, and I totally agree with you. It's just, you know, everything sounds like it's a good thing until you actually sit down and actually watch it work, if it actually does work or not. But let's say, you know, if it was an opportunity to, because evidently the gentlemen, they must make a profit off of whatever their whatever the result of their process is, or they wouldn't be in the business. Why would we have to have like Commissioner Hall would somebody to sell our landfill to, just to sell it to a third party? Why couldn't that something we can do in the future if it does become a viable operation that we could sell directly to this individual so he can make a profit off of his three-phase microwave, whatever he calls it. But, you know, that way offset what we're already expending anyways. So instead of having a third party involved, is there something possibly in the future, if this does become something, if it's the next greatest thing since sliced toast, which was not even a good idea, it actually brought bacteria into the food, but I'm going off subject again. But so I mean, is that a possibility too?
Yes, so the partnerships could be 3P, they could be between the county and the processor. It would really just depend on the business plan, how that looks for the county. For these emerging technologies or any technology, we would want the county to be in the least risk position. So having an agreement where they're buying our waste would be an ideal solution. Most companies will not buy your waste, even if they're generating a byproduct. And again, it comes back to when we talk about the pyrolysis, the microwave. The only thing in the United States we've seen is waste energy and landfilling. And the waste is getting paid to go there, and it's a waste minimization technique. So if it ever does come to fruition that those technologies are proven and economically feasible and scalable to Collier County and applicable, that's something that we would bring back to the board with recommendations for the type of agreement that would be in place.
Well, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished, I'm sorry.
And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I remember after Hurricane Ian and touring, you know, the northern section over there where the landfill is, we occupied a large portion to the north of the road, kind of where our deep water injection area is, for all that white material like refrigerators, stoves, things of that nature, and a lot of some other debris that didn't go into our landfill. Now, using that, was that a temporary thing, or is that already existing permits for those properties as part of the original landfill?
So a couple things for that. That's when we have a hurricane, we have debris management sites to manage the debris that's picked up by a separate contractor, not your standard curbside contractor, but our debris removal contractors. And FEMA requires that we separate out those recyclable materials such as the white goods, appliances. That also happens every day in collection. Just for what it's worth noting. The land that is north of the landfill does have a permitted debris management site. So that is permitted specifically for that use during those emergency times for the debris removal mission. And it is part of the contract and part of FEMA requirements that the materials that can be recycled are recycled, such as the white goods.
Like our Immokalee site, which we know has an older technology, is not lined. But which it sounds like that what we get out of there is actually quality dirt to mix with new fill when we do line an area to keep like an ongoing process where you're taking here and building there, taking here, building there, and you have material on site to do it. That northern section, would that be something easier to bring into a permit that already exists than going out and trying to get a whole new permitting process for property we already own?
That is correct. The information that needs to be submitted to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection is the same. So the goal would be to modify your long-term care closure permit for development, construction, and then operation.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to ask in terms of Immokalee. It's 120 acres, and that's a permitted landfill for the whole 120? Or is it just for the 20 acres that was being used?
The site is permitted, but for disposal, it was the two disposal cells that are now closed.
Just the 20.5 acres?
Correct. But you have flexibility within the entire site if you were to change from a long-term care operation to active landfilling again.
Now, 120 acres, does that, in terms of just duration, how much time does that get you if you're looking at the growth in the county? If you had a 120 acre landfill, because I'm assuming you can't, at each of the borders, have a...
I'm going to give you an unsatisfying response, and that is it depends.
Yeah.
So with direction, we can analyze the site and try to figure out within that footprint what could be accomplished, because there is an ongoing project at that site to build a new recycle center, so that's taken a portion of the site out of play.
Is there land around there that could be acquired to expand that site?
There is.
So at least theoretically, we do have a small site that might serve as a landfill in an emergency.
And Troy, if you could go back a slide, please. Yeah, so this slide shows the Immokalee landfill outlined in red to your left, and there's surrounding acres that are agricultural around it, and the 20 acres of landfill cell that are on that property are very small. It's the two most eastern hills, if you will, on that property.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to go back to the idea, I'm not advocating for this by any means, I'm just trying to free will think. Yep. Since the guy on the microwave, since he doesn't have any history, doesn't have anything to base his credibility on, what if we were to allow him to take a small portion on his dime and give him a small portion and let him test himself and get his history with us? And if he's successful, we grow it. If he's not, we boot him. So those are just things I'm thinking about.
If I might, for the record, George Yilmaz, your department head for public utilities. Commissioner, by answering your inquiry or question, I'm going to address at the same time similar inquiry came from our Commissioner Cole as well as Commissioner McDaniel. So one way to achieve going after emerging, unproven technologies is that optimizing opportunities north of the landfill, which is called Solid Waste Park, Business Park. We own that land, and it's permitted for all activities but landfilling. So that will require some permitting and land use change. But for the purpose of a pilot program, like you laid out, for a purpose of a pilot program, out of RFI, request for information, we have a number of applicants, and we're in the process of looking into number of RFPs, which is the next step for looking into technologies, proven, and if it's unproven, entertain a pilot program, small portion of the waste, demonstrate to us. We have very smart minds on our team to develop a contract and agreement which will put no liability to our board and the county, but get into some kind of demonstration project. I think that we have the intellectual power and American ingenuity for us to be able to take reasonable risk and get close to bleeding edge, but definitely test the cutting edge. So I just want to share this with our board that we're not running away from risk. We want to manage it all the way to line bleeding edge. And I think that a pilot program north of the landfill for these emerging technologies called Solid Waste Business Park and permitted for such would be a good location. And you will see as part of this workshop, we will have a number of solid stations going out and adjustments will be made in terms of our integrated solid waste management. And I hope I did answer your inquiries about how we're going to go about emerging, non-proven technologies that I think we need to be open-minded for.
Oh, that satisfies mine. I mean, I'm all about taking a risk without it being risky. And it's possible.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Yes, and on that note, I think we have to have faith that our staff is looking at all emerging technologies and looking at all alternatives for us, because this is as dire a concern with them as it is for us, and the long-term impacts for our entire community. So with that said, you've been real good about talking about the waste-to-energy cost, $700 million. What's the revenue?
The cost is for the.
That was an example you used at Palm Beach. That was a $672 million expense for Palm Beach.
Correct.
But I didn't see what's the revenue. How do you get the money back, or what's the rate of return for that investment other than longevity?
Typically, the bonds are paid off, and it's a 20-year note. But remember, solid waste is a cost. There can be an offset, so some of the offsets are metal recovery on the back end, sale through a power purchase agreement of electricity to the utility. In their case, it's Florida Power and Light, but it is still a net cost. So really, I can answer your question that the expense is offset by revenue. That's really in two directions: the energy and the material that is recovered. But it is paid for as an essential service for managing the solid waste.
I understand it.
If I may add to it, Commissioner, it's paid by the customers. Revenue is coming from customers with increased cost of municipal solid waste management disposal. So instead of costing us $54, customers paying per ton, it will go up $150, whatever that matching revenue will be. So it will be burdened by our own current customers.
I understand. Okay, but I understand that becomes a cost for the customer base. But is there any data coming from the revenue generated for the waste to energy conversion, for the disposition of the steel if it's extracted out, or the energy that's in fact created? Do we have any idea of what the revenue generation is that offsets that initial burden?
I can answer that. We can follow up with some data information based on some counties that have waste energy, such as Lee County, Palm Beach. And also, just to put on the record and keep in mind, is your solid waste management is an enterprise fund, and so far in history has been cash and carry. It doesn't mean that can't change, but I just want to make sure I did put that on the record for how it has been for the past, since conception. Well, we can certainly come back with that.
Portion of our discussions going forward, if in fact we start looking at waste to energy conversion and the siting of a facility, we need to have the entire picture as to what can happen, not just the expense associated. And that was the reason why I asked that question.
No, understood, and that makes complete sense. And we'll have to follow up with some of the agreements that those counties have with their operating entities for those that different technology. Yep.
Commissioner Castro.
With regard to Commissioner Hall's question, when he basically was saying, how long would it take for the landfill to run out? And then you said, oh, you're going to hate this answer, but it depends. I just think for purposes of this workshop, and it does kind of go in line with the data that Commissioner McDaniel was talking about, I think it would be helpful to have data that shows, hey, all things being equal, if nothing changed, there was no growth in Collier County, here's the number for the landfill. With 10% growth, here's when the landfill would be filled up. And it's somewhat hypothetical, but it's at least a starting point to put up on the wall. And then as you get through the years, you grade it and say, wow, we were off. You know, we expected 10% growth. There was 17% growth. So now instead of the landfill being filled in 22 years, it's now got maybe 19 years. And we know it's a little bit fluid, but when we're talking about like data that could be helpful, especially to our replacements as they sort of start tracking those guesstimates and then measuring them when we actually pass the 5-year point and go, wow, we were pretty close. We guessed about a 9% growth in population or what have you, and that shaved a couple of years off the landfill. We're you know, the chart is going a little bit the wrong way. We're about to run out of space a little quicker if it continues, or, you know, we're about right on track. And that wouldn't have to be something that, you know, NASA would need to figure out for us, but it would just be a good guesstimate, you know, chart to see about where we are and then grade it, you know, over time during these workshops to see if we're close. That would just be, you know, my input. Because I think it would be important to sort of monitor how close we're getting to really, you know, a cautious time that, hey, we need to really start looking for something because we're tracking that we're about to run out of space, you know, in 12 years, something like.
So, yeah, and I just wanted to point out, so we do that every year as part of the AUIR process for the Collier County landfill. And knowing that the garbage that goes into the Collier County landfill is all from what is we call Municipal Service District 1, which is basically everywhere except Ave Maria and Immokalee, which is transferred out. We use the Bieber chart, which is based on populations, not the unit growth. It's based on population growth, and we look at the waste generation per unit. And we adjust that every year, and we reflect on where we were. So if you looked at the AUIR 2 years ago, the opening would say the estimated life was 2060. However, it's been reduced by 1 year because we saw waste generation increase due to COVID or whatever it might be that we've seen in the industry.
And in that, does it show a projection as to a guesstimate? Okay.
Yes. So currently the Collier County landfill estimated capacity reached is 2059. So, and that's based on data from previous years, annual survey, waste generation, and taking averages of those. That's part of the growth management plan for ensuring that capacity, as well as the 10-year of capacity requirement and a 2-year line capacity.
Still does depend, but we at least have the data.
Yeah, and not to belabor the point, it was a slightly different question from the chair in terms of how much disposal capacity could be gained at Immokalee with the scenario that we described. And it does require not putting a person on the moon, but some engineering analysis. But that's why we wanted to have the conversation, because if there was no interest from the commission, we're not going to advance that analysis.
Thank you.
Commissioner Colwell.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just looking at the Immokalee site again, and I had noticed that those 4 parcels around it are owned by Silver Strand LLC. Do we know who that is, or do we have any clue?
Yeah, so as part of we really did a due diligence before we came here today, making sure that anything we presented to you would end with an action item that we could bring back to the board for some policy direction. So there is a current, I think it might be listed on there is a current application in for a mining in some parts of that agricultural land. We have a study done on the permitting feasibility. We have a study done on the land planning feasibility. The owners are the Colliers that own that currently, yes.
So even that one parcel that abuts up to the original Immokalee, you're talking an extra 460, you're about 580. You'd increase the footprint about 580 acres with just that one parcel of that LLC. And I know I got people giggling at me way back in the day when we were talking about the Colliers wanting a piece of our property that they sold to us, or we bought, or whatever, over there near their new development by 29 and oil well. And I says, everything comes with a price. So if the Colliers have a piece of property that might increase our waste management or our footprint around one of our dumps, maybe that could be a trade-off. And a lot of people are like, well, you know what? This might be an opportunity to strike a deal. I don't know, because they want something from us that we have, and we could use something that they have.
Tell them.
All right, Daniel?
We're in negotiations with them on that 500 acres right now to exchange that 500 acres for the east 500 of the Camp Keys piece that we already own. It isn't a secret. It's a matter of public record. We're going through the environmental surveys. We're going through the appraisals. We're going through all of the stuff. So that's in the works today.
And to add, as one of the last action items that you'll see on here when we talk about the policy direction to come back to the board with, it does list the potential to revitalize the Immokalee landfill. So if it was to the board's pleasure, we would then work closely with the Growth Management Division on that discussion and make sure that we came back to the board for any direction. But we certainly don't want to leave it off the list of options without giving you the due diligence.
You're telling me we have a chance.
So you're saying there's a
Saying
chance.
there's a chance. All right, thank you.
Daniel, if you can go ahead and proceed.
Okay, if we could advance to,
So,
okay. So we want to talk about optimizing your existing landfill. This slide simply shows constraints and opportunities. The Collier County landfill has been there for decades. The 305 property to its west was purchased by the county, is now part of the Citygate Planned Unit Development, or PUD, and it is used, as you know, for a marquee sports complex. The area to the north is the Resource Recovery Business Park, PUD, that was established for ancillary and support services for the county landfill and other county functions. However, there are two specific opportunities we would like to talk about. Next slide, please. When we think about the two optimization opportunities, one is contiguous to the Collier County landfill, but beyond the current site, and that's what we're going to talk about first. Eastern optimization really is a long-term opportunity. When I say long-term, based on our preliminary analysis, we're talking about potentially 15 generations worth of disposal capacity if you were to optimize the Collier County landfill laterally or to the east. Next slide, please. The entire acre is a square. It's 645 acres. The waste area that we analyzed is 411 acres. And again, it would be contiguous as originally modeled to be aligned with the current footprint of the Collier County landfill, so on the northern two-thirds of that site. As I mentioned, we're looking at nearly 300 years of capacity if built to the same height as the Collier County landfill is permitted to, or 200 feet. The capacity estimate does consider adequate buffers to the north and to the east, while the estimated capacity would decrease if there were wider buffers. By any measure, it would still be significant capacity gained. However, as we talked about earlier, it would not be an easy lift. It would require land acquisition, modifications of the Land Development Code, or LDC, and PUD to allow a landfill in Section 31. It would also require modifying a number of federal, state, local environmental permits and the state or FDEP operating permit, including the operating and closure plans. And it may require wetlands mitigation, may. This opportunity has significant value, and it absolutely would enable the county to control its solid waste destiny through achieving a best value solution. It is important to note that your predecessors have provided the policy direction, and your professional staff have done an incredible job at maximizing recovery and expanding capacity. What is presented to you is the opportunity to do what they have not been able to do, which is provide a long-term solid waste management solution for up to 15 generations. Next slide, please. The other opportunity for optimization is within the existing Collier County landfill site. If both on-site areas were taken advantage of, you would gain approximately 29 years of additional capacity. That optimization has some of the same requirements as the eastern expansion option we just discussed in terms of modifying the LDC and PUD to expand the landfill footprint to the south, as well as modifying similar permits. This is important. It would require moving stormwater west to the 305 property, and that is currently, your stormwater is managed on-site in the southwest portion of the parcel. So the only way to expand in that area would be to manage the stormwater off-site. And it would absolutely require wetland mitigation if you develop these areas, because these areas are designated as wetlands today. Next slide, please. Okay. Beyond the initiatives presented, I did want to share some of the continued actions of your staff based on past policy direction. And these activities include maximizing source reduction, reuse, and recycling, as evidenced by Collier County being one of 3 counties that is meeting or exceeding the state's 75 recycling goal. Continuous engagement with stakeholders, soliciting their feedback, including both the community as well as the vendors. Benchmarking performance with peer counties, which is we consider a best practice to understand where you stand relative to your region, the state, and the country, and in some cases the world. Evaluating best industry practices to enhance current and develop new services and programs. As we've talked about, maintaining situational awareness of emerging market trends and technologies, and delivering best value solid waste management services that are consistent with your enduring guiding principles. Last slide. So as we complete our discussion today, I want to thank you for your time and your valuable and insightful input. I will close with the following action items to return to the Commission to seek the following policy direction. So we started with amending County Ordinance 2005-54 to create a single solid waste district. Again, this is viewed as a housekeeping item that does not have any impact today, but could be provide you with greater flexibility in the future. The second is amend the landfill operating agreement to align with the integrated solid waste management strategy and, for all intents and purposes, clean it up. There have been a number of amendments to the landfill operating agreement over its life, and it would certainly benefit from being conformed, as well as better aligning the service expectations and opportunities to maximize the value of that asset. As we touched on, establishing compaction performance standards to maximize airspace. And again, we talk about having mitigation plans. You currently have long-term disposal capacity agreements with Waste Management at their other facilities, but they're somewhat limited in terms of tons or volume. So it's also an opportunity to secure long-term disposal capacity at their regional landfills, not only for solid waste that's generated every day, but also disaster debris, which, as you can speak to your neighbors to the north, they have been reckoning with over the past several hurricane seasons. And lastly, to achieve concurrence to control your long-range solid waste management destiny. So identifying a time frame to secure eastern properties, to expand the Collier County landfill, modifying the LDC PUD and the permits, negotiate expansion of the operational boundaries with Waste Management, your contract operator of the landfill, and engage with stakeholders and potential partners regarding revitalizing the Immokalee landfill to address the growing needs in that area. We now look to you to provide your guidance and direction, and our team is available to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. So, great presentation. Well laid out. Made me think a lot. And as I'm looking at the last one for the landfill expansion, you mentioned it's $390 million development cost for, what, another 300 years of use? Has there been any thought of how much it'd be or how much money or obstacles you would anticipate to get us another 100 years? Instead of taking such a big bite of the pie, maybe a smaller bite.
I mean, it's scalable.
It is scalable?
Yeah, and we can run that analysis and
You don't
get
have
you
to. I was just thinking, I'm up here spitballing.
You know,
300 years is a long time.
That's a long time.
Are we paying him to think?
Not very much.
Microwave thing down pat by there.
Anything else, Commissioner Hall? No. Okay, Commissioner McDaniel.
Yes, and you know, going to the east is a terribly arduous process. There's people, there's businesses, there's houses out there. Oh my, you want pitchforks and torches. So, but the scalability aspect of it, Mr. Hall, is certainly a discussion point that we can have. The one thing that I saw you gloss over, because it was in my read ahead, and I read ahead, by the way, just so you know, were the bioreactors. We didn't have a discussion with regard to the bioreactors. There's a picture of them in here that I saw, but we really didn't talk about those and that whether or not that they could be technology or availability to help us lengthen our useful life. Are you not talking about them on purpose?
So which slide are you referring to for the bioreactors?
Well, it's what I thought they were bioreactors. It was a picture. Let me find the picture. This one. Resource Recovery Business Park here. These look like bioreactors down here. Is that not bioreactors?
No, that's not bioreactors. So that is basically explaining that in order for the vertical expansion at the landfill, which is where all the landfill life and capacity is, a lot of the operations, which is the slide before that, will be relocated to that resource recovery business park. So that's what you're looking at is a conceptual plan of the activities that will take place on the resource recovery park. So we look at the potential for digesters if they were needed, as well as renewable gas service sources.
Okay, and so I misconstrued that picture. And so what do bioreactors do for us with regard to adding longevity to our landfill and its operations?
Commissioner, I'll take that. Bioreactors, active landfilling, designed to convert Class 1 landfill, which we have currently Naples landfill permitted as Class 1 landfill. You actively manage the leachate and recirculate, and you virtually turn landfill into an anaerobic digester. So it's a wet landfill operation versus dry landfill operation. Dry landfill operation takes all the leachate as much as possible with no recirculation, let the landfill settle and biodigest itself over 30 years, 40 years. Bioreactors can be designed smaller cells, and every 7 to 11 years, you're able to go back there, reuse the same place for new waste stream. So scalability comes in. So if you have, let's say, 10 bioreactors in the form of landfills, advanced bioreactors, it will take 5 years to fill one, and you go to next one, and you go to next one. By the time 10 to 15 year hits, you're already reclaiming the first one that you filled. So it's not a permanent landfill you walk away from. It's a bioreactor. You're managing the biodegradation through leachate and microbiome and through means and methods managing the gas. So every bioreactor becomes renewable energy gas source. So you get biogas, about 50+% in this process.
For my non-scientific brain, Doc.
Yep.
We actually then, as part of the scalability of this entire discussion, could add bioreactors into our world with the expansion of the existing landfill or the reclamation of the Immokalee landfill. That would be a prudent thing, I would think, if you're in the reclamation process, that you add an installation of an apparatus that would allow for that ultimate cell, the newly created cell, to be reclaimed and reutilized again.
Yes, sir. And I think when you look at the action items here from a policy decision-making standpoint, we can bring those items. However, this is more on a strategic level, as you know. Those are more tactical moves. So if we need to, for instance, if the board says we don't want to be in landfill business, go after waste reduction technologies like waste to energy and other emerging technologies, that's the direction we're going to take. But if the board's wishes, we want to buy more land next to our current landfills and optimize those landfills and close those landfills using current sites that we own. And when we close the landfills in long term, it's going to be your legacy. Do we want to have Egyptian pyramid, or we want to have something like Baker's Park, where landfill becomes invisible and you can actually restore it as part of being a park, passive and active use. So if the board wishes to say, go ahead and go after every single action items you got here, staff, and we'll come back with hybrid solutions, looking into feasibility, land acquisition surrounding Immokalee landfill, and permittability. Same with our current landfill, and go further, put RFPs out there, look into options for waste reduction and energy technologies. And I think that our consultant and staff gave you at least 3 action items gives us those flexibilities. Am I correct?
Yes.
Oh, by the way, I just want to mention Daniel Deitch is a very unique engineer. Not only he's an engineer, but he's an applied scientist. There's a difference. So applied scientists think above and beyond 4 corners. So thank you for being on board. Also, he's a former mayor, so he knows and understands policy, what it takes to move long-term decisions and lock it in so that it is one of those legacy policy decisions and action items, regardless of what the board might look like 10, 15 years from now. That's a legacy program in front of you that you will shape while you're on board. That will impact 15 generations.
Thank you, Doc. And we're totally impressed with you, just so you know. At least I am. I don't know. The quick question is, what effectively is the cost associated with the bioreactors from an investment standpoint?
Plus minus 5%, as same as dry class 1 landfill, because you're going after class 1 landfill. What you're doing with bioreactors is that you're regenerating airspace, and that optimization financial portfolio can be presented in terms of selection of class 1 dry or wet landfill. So short answer is it's going to be equivalent to what we're doing now.
Okay.
And to add to that, a bioreactor is essentially very similar to an existing landfill, except you're recirculating the liquids within, so you're just enhancing the breakdown of the composition. Yes. So that's the short answer, simple of it.
I understand the short answer. I understand the technology, but you haven't said how much, because I saw a picture early in my life as a county commissioner. There were bioreactors situated around this landfill, that landfill. There were bioreactors on the perimeter somewhere.
Commissioner, you're right. And when we purchased Site 305, right west of current landfill, that site was purchased with the intent to look into feasibility of road alignment, Banfield road alignment, and right next to current landfill on the west side, identified 5 to 7 bioreactors to be located. However, the purchased land was repurposed through policy decision-making process to be a sports complex. So that's why that's not on table here. We continue to, as our chair indicated, look to the future, not question past policy-making actions by the board.
We weren't questioning it. I just had a recollection of it out there somewhere. Has any consideration been given to the Resource Recovery Park to the north for the utilization of the bioreactors to be in that vicinity?
I can answer that. So right now, the PUD for that property does not permit landfilling, and bioreacting is a type of landfilling, so it is prohibited in the PUD for that property. Essentially because after the waste breaks down, you are then digging it back up, reclaiming it. So for all the activities that take place in a landfill would be the same as a bioreactor.
I understand. So my question is, who created the PUD?
So the PUD's history goes back to 2000. I'd have to get back to you on the PUD.
The short answer is the Board of County Commissioners created PUD.
Of course, sir.
Another short answer. Another short answer for you is that which. Excuse me. Another short answer for you is that which is created by the Board of County Commissioners can and often is adjusted by the Board of County Commissioners. So don't stay linear, Ms. Engineer, in your thought processes.
Commissioner LaCastro.
Yeah, I think the one question we answered today is, and you had asked it in the beginning, how is this important to us? I think you've seen that it is. So one of the things that I would say, and I think it goes without saying, when we have these workshops, you guys should always have a seat at the table. There's a bunch of things you all are doing, a lot of things that you're doing that are really great and worth spotlighting at a forum like this, and not just behind the scenes. You've met with us all separately, and you've been able to show how you've saved citizens money on, garbage pickup, and it's not district specific. Every citizen in our district gets their garbage picked up. The awards you've won for recycling, those are things that shouldn't be glossed over. And then the other thing that I think begs having you here on a regular basis, and we talked about it a little bit, technology is changing so much. So some of the things we hypothetically talked about here where we go, still remains to be seen. You might be sitting here in 3 years going, man, they're doing it in Pinellas County, and we just took a trip there. We didn't have to go overseas or anything. And we discovered some things. So keeping the commissioners, abreast of what's going on in a technology standpoint, this is why we have these workshops. Totally separate thing. Action item 1, if I understand you correctly, to alleviate confusion and ambiguity, all of Collier County is now District 1 when it comes to trash pickup or whatever the solid waste. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, so essentially it's one solid waste district, and all the county residents that receive our service receive the same service. So there's no reason to differentiate
But we're
between
calling it
District 1 and
District 1,
District
or?
2.
Okay, we're not calling it that. Okay.
Essentially, the MSBU's are still separate because you have collection contracts that are aligned with those, but it would create a single solid waste district that has the benefit units with it.
And what would that district be called? Nothing specific, no numbers or
Solid
anything?
waste district, yes, no numbers.
Okay, solid waste. And the reason I say that is I'm always the district that bears the confusion because FDOT has a District 1, but it's not me. It's a bigger thing. And so when I saw the chart and it looked like everything in light blue is now District 1, I was like, okay, you're making it better for these guys, worse for me. So you just answered that question because there is that confusion a lot of times by people in my district. They'll hear FDOT say something that they're doing in District 1 and they think it's us, and we don't, we're trying to alleviate. So you're spot on. Thank you.
Commissioner Colwell.
Thank you, Chairman. I really like this presentation. It's very informative, and I really do think this is a very important thing we all need to discuss and get ahead of. It may not affect us personally, but it will affect this county and the people that come behind us, and they'll say, you know what, thank God these guys thought of this. But I did, so in the last couple of slides, when you were showing expansion to the east, the expansion to the 2 preserve areas, you actually assigned some numbers to them, like the life, and it would extend. The one says almost 300 years, 298 years of capacity. But I didn't see anything, because we discussed earlier that, moving some of this acreage to the north, which is a possibility on property we already own, was there any studies to how many years that can add, or what portion of that footprint we could use to increase? Because I know the 2 little parcels at the bottom doesn't appear to really add a whole lot, like 20 years or something. Right.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Daniel to also elaborate on the life of Eastward Move It based on the analysis that was performed, because I think that's important to clarify how far out the analysis went on that eastern property.
I'm not so concerned about the eastern. We have to buy that. We don't have to buy what's north.
Yeah.
So
I'm just curious how much life will add to going to the north.
So we have not conducted that analysis. We don't have the authority to change the PUD. Go ahead. But hearing that, if we could.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. If we could advance one slide, there are some planned activities. So the reason that we showed the previous slide is to identify where yard trash, where your construction and demolition debris or class 3 materials are being sorted on the landfill today. They need to be moved off the landfill to build out the landfill as it's currently permitted. And they are designated for placement on the Resource Recovery Business Park. And you'll probably notice on the right-hand side, there is a very large area for disaster debris management. And again, trying to be forward-thinking, what are the kinds of related uses that support solid waste management and disaster recovery? Space, it's constrained, but it's also fungible within those constraints. If it is the will, with the exception of the deep injection well, which is in place, as well as some of the planned other county activities within the Resource Recovery Business Park, there is some flexibility, but there are lakes, and maybe the lakes could be filled in, right? There's a lot of thought that needs to be, or a lot of consideration that needs to be managed to figure out as was stated at the prior workshop, how much juice can be squeezed out of that fruit, because size in this case does matter, not just for how high you can get, and it's a point that I did not make on the southern expansion. Because of the width of those sections, you can't get to the otherwise permitted height. So that's part of the reason that it diminishes the value of developing those areas. So again, it is not rocket science, but it would benefit us to have, direction to, well, go explore this and report back to us, which has been the approach that has worked successfully over the last 20-plus years between your professional staff and the county commission, because you really shouldn't leave stones unturned if there might be something beneficial under.
That has been a really thorough and very well done presentation. I certainly appreciate it. Anyone registered to speak? Anybody online or anything? So we don't have any public speakers. Commissioner McDaniel, let's hear your
And I already gave direction to the county attorney to begin the amendment of the PUD, just so you know. Okay. I would make a recommendation. I know we can't vote on anything, but it would be my wish that consider your recommendations for all three of these action items to be on the radar, plus the other things that this board has talked about today. The real, and again, optimization of everything doesn't all have to happen at once. Scalability is an important factor. Where we go, how we go, what we do, and so on. So don't take bioreactors out just because you can't do all 8 of them at one shot. Don't. So that would be my recommendation, that we go forward on all 3 action items along with that.
Maybe we can break this down into some pieces here, because the action item number 3 is a pretty broad action item. Action items 1 and 2 I think are fairly simple. County attorney would be involved in amending the ordinance and amending the operating agreement. So I think there certainly is consensus, I would assume, to have the staff do that. Let's talk a little bit more for just a minute about number 3, because basically I think if we just say go do number 3, that doesn't really give you a whole lot of direction, because you've got every item on here that you would have to look at. And I think a couple of them are perhaps not worth looking at right away. So just as an example, Commissioner McDaniel, you pointed out that expansion to the south, you believe would create some tremendous problems.
To the east, not
I'm sorry,
to
to
the
the east. I meant to the east.
I actually like the idea of the expansion to the south. We'd have to redo some water management things.
That's what I was getting at. I just used the wrong direction. That, let's eliminate, for our discussion today, in direction to our staff, eliminate the things that we feel right now that are just not doable, but let's focus on the things that are. So expansion to the east is a problem, but expansion to the south may be worth looking at. Is that correct?
And maybe just to simplify it is, and to the north as well. I mean, and just to simplify it, I don't want to discount going to the east at all, because we may have an opportunity at some stage to acquire more land or do something out there. But I think for now, just modifying the direction to staff that we negotiate with the expansion of the operations in a cost feasible manner is a good enough description. I mean, we already own the land to the south. We already own the land to the north, so those are the most cost feasible places that I think we should focus our energies on right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, because it makes sense that, because those lands, permitting wise too, are much easier that we can acquire, the long process and arduous process of getting the permitting, because they're already attached to parts of our project anyways. And, and it's not costing the taxpayers any more money to purchase land. And even if we get, we're looking at some crazy numbers, 300 years, like you said, that's a lot of years. We can gain 90 years, 100 years out of this north and south. I mean, that's a step in the right direction.
Then new technology will be available.
Then the other item that we've discussed is the Immokalee landfill. And I think it's worthwhile for staff to look at reclaiming that landfill and maybe even possibly expanding it. I don't like the thought that we would be reliant on sending waste out of the county.
Agreed.
Because regardless, it's our waste, and if something breaks down along the way, you know, the landfill we're sending it to closes, we have to have capacity. So I think adding that kind of to the list would be beneficial to let us know what that would entail and how much life we can get out of something like that. Commissioner LaCastro.
I think we have to be careful about the wordage we use when we dismiss you all from this table. I understand what's being said here. Oh, going out to the east would be problematic, but maybe not south or north. I think smaller baby steps are, we need analysis on all the directions. If not, you know what the front page of the paper is going to say tomorrow? Collier County Commissioners decide that moving east is impossible, so they're going to move south. Okay, I think we'll start to hear from people south that go, when did that happen? So I don't think anybody's saying that, but I think just smaller baby steps saying, we know we need to analyze all the different directions of what makes the most sense. We own land in certain areas, and just being able to say, you know, we're not force feeding something in a certain direction and ruling out a certain direction. Commissioner McDaniel's right. There's certain directions that become problematic, but this isn't the meeting to say it's off the table, and nobody was saying that, but I just wanted to sort of clarify and say that, you know, one of the homework assignments here is do the analysis, and then, you know, we take a look and see, hey, down the road, what sounds the most feasible and the reasons why, is what I would say.
Commissioner.
And we're kind of saying that, but just wanted to clarify it.
Commissioner McDaniel.
And then just as a point, Commissioner Saunders, you talked about action item number 3 being maybe a little bit broad, but if we just added the language, timeframe, cost feasibility to secure additional properties, not specify the eastern properties as direction to our staff. Are you okay with action item number 3 if we changed eastern to added?
My concern was simply that if we just simply go do your analysis on everything, we do have some limited capacity to evaluate everything, and that's all I was trying to get at, to try to give them more of a rifle shot as opposed to a shotgun shot in terms of coming back to us, because we do have some time to evaluate things. But, Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what we're saying is, as far as direction, is we'll keep our eyes and ears open to new technology, to wherever that can apply. Landfill reclamation, that we're going to look at the Immokalee landfill, where that concerns, and then the smartest way to expand the existing landfill. We're just kind of narrowing it down for those 3 areas. Would that be a fair assumption?
That sounds good to me. Does that, everybody sort of concur with that then? Mm-hmm. All right, anything else you need to have from us?
I don't mean to be gratuitous, but I do want to thank all of you, because so often we see that decisions are made when facing a crisis. You are not in a crisis, and it's really owed to the hard work that your professional staff have been doing over the past few decades. So thank you for allocating this time and entertaining the conversation and providing your feedback that gives us clear direction on where we're going to move.
Thank you. Again, a very good presentation, so thank you for that. Ms. Patterson, we have one other item left on our workshop. Do you have any idea approximately how long that would take? Is that a 1 hour thing or a 3 hour thing? What's your best guess?
2 more.
Do we have 2 more?
Strategic planning and resource
Ah, okay.
Yes,
Well, then,
yes, sir.
The reason I was started that discussion is, should we break for lunch?
I say yes.
All right. Everybody sort of agree? All right.
I was not listening to you.
We're going to
Imagine
break
that.
for lunch.
Yeah,
We're going to take a break for lunch, yes.
This is a big change.
Ellie's hungry.
Then how much time do we need? Now, I brought my lunch, so I'm good with 15 minutes.
Mine's on the way.
Come back at 1?
1 o'clock, is that enough?
1 o'clock's fine.
All right. All right, we will be in recess until 1 o'clock.
You don't mind me eating on the dais, I'll bring it in here.